Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Canuckleheads. It's been a little bit of time since we last seen each other, and we have a wonderful guest with us joining us today. Guest, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit here. Is it Taya?
Oh, Taya, yes. Hello.
Taya, yes. Welcome to
I have to
Canuckleheads.
get used
Welcome.
to the T puns.
Sorry, I had to because I had to find some way to incorporate a kiwi into the logo for the show. I just had to do
That's
it.
funny. Oh, I didn't notice the kiwi.
But welcome, Taya, to the show. It's wonderful to have you. I know we've had a little bit of discussions offline, and we've been kind of carrying the same banner for the past couple of weeks here, and taking some lumps from the crowd. But I wanted to get you on the show because I think it's a very important topic that we have today. A very important topic that we have today, and something that I think a whole bunch of people can relate to. And this YouTube podcast being one of the last bastions for free speech on the internet, unfortunately, we're getting squeezed out, it looks like. And so this is a little bit of something that you have a lot of experience regarding and talking about and fighting for, which is why I reached out to get you on the show and talk a little bit about this. So to start, I wanted to get you to just give the audience a little bit of a rundown about who you are and what you do, and then we can get into the topic here in just a little bit. So,
Okay.
floor is yours.
Okay, so I've been on the internet for way too long. I think I finished it in 2015. And I've been basically since high school, so like nearly 30 years. I started in political organizing and then moved into campaigning and then into digital and sort of worked as a user experience person for, in tech, like this sort of standard person, riding the wave of digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to see I kind of live in the matrix. I'm like super online, but I was super online before it was cool, right? I'm like,
Weren't we all?
when there was mostly positives,
Right.
when it was mostly positives before that kind of love-hate relationship sort of kicked in. And then sort of around 2014, started to see the wheels start to fall off a little bit in terms of what we were promised online, in terms of, being like the sort of that mob stuff the mobs have always been there, right? But really saw a sort of takeover of the internet, like by the marketers, the corporate brand. Like I spent half my career trying to convince them that going online and marketing and all those things were important. And there was pushback all the time. And at some point they just went, well, this was advertising agencies moved in and sort of went, oh, well, it's ours now. We own it, and we're going to run it according to, I joke about them being the data cult, but they basically became the data cult. And I also joke that I'm the sort of the last remaining human-centered designer, right? Because human-centered design is a discipline that is obviously human first. That was sort of the principles around this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched my industry become data-centered, algorithm-centered, conversion-centered, right? And that's just that flip into just this corporate Fisher-Price version of the internet that we've got now.
Unfortunately.
And I sit here all day going, okay, that's not, like you can't rewrite what happened. This was stolen. We were promised one thing and not given what we were promised, which was this ability to express ourselves and make friends and connect with each other and, all of those things.
Well, and this has been a war that's been waged for many, many years. I mean, we've seen it happen back in the 60s. I think probably even further before that, but resurged in the 90s, and now we're seeing it again now. So it's on this like 20 or 30 year cycle where whatever comes up, it tries to. We see the powers that be try to snuff out and try to push the censorship, and I don't think we've ever seen it as strong as it's been this time in this iteration so far.
Yeah, and when it extends beyond censorship, and this is like it's gone, and I'm sure, this has happened before. We just didn't know about it. It wasn't unfolding before us. So there's a benefit, which is that this has always happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, people have been unpersoned since, all the time. We just know
Exactly.
about it now,
Yeah.
like Assange and those sorts of things that, we know about those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that interests me most about the kiwi farms, which is what introduced us to each other, was how extreme and how vicious the censorship was. It's not just a matter of taking down a website, but it was taking away the payments. We've seen this a few times now.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself having to defend people that I don't necessarily agree with, because I go, like, this is too far. Like, destroying a person without process is just, it's very deeply chilling,
And that's the big key behind it, is there is no due process there. It's basically, and it's funny because the internet's going to set on fire from you saying that we know each other from the kiwi farms. It's just I can just see it already. It's so funny.
Oh, no, not on kiwi farms, through the Twitter, like me talking about it. Yes, we connected over
the situation.
The three people that are talking about
exactly. But you already know the way the way that Twitter works, the way the internet works. They're gonna take that. That means that they were on the kiwi farms. They're terrible people. No,
years ago, I decided people are going to say what they think. You can't control that. It's
so funny though. I just laugh at it at this point. I just laugh at it. But it's like we met each other through the coverage of this news and the talking about the assault on freedoms and liberties that we've been seeing. And it's one of these drastically ridiculous things where it's like it used to be, and this is so weird because it's funny because we have a Canadian and an Aussie talking about this, about an American issue with freedom, which is we always get told that Canada and Australia are like the biggest commies on the face of the planet, and meanwhile America is the one that's having the biggest issue in bed right now. Like
and they do dominate the conversation.
They do.
And it is American overreach a lot of the time, right?
It really is.
It is actually
mostly based on American issues, right? Like the entire reason, and this is stuff that I've been watching very quietly from the sidelines. Is like the reason that Josh lost the DDoS protection from the Russian company was because of Americans pressuring and a fear of American pushback from the authorities and stuff like that. So it's just little things like this. It's like they literally don't have any crossover, but America has so much power in terms of the internet as a whole, and this was supposed to be like the bastion of freedom. You can just go on the internet, you could say what you want, blah blah blah. And people always talk about anonymity and talk about a quote unquote OPSEC and all this stuff. But that doesn't exist. Like, if people think that going on a tour, or people think that using a VPN means that you're the most anonymous person, you can say the most heinous thing on the planet, there is no anonymity on the internet. If you're on the internet, the people know who you are. Bottom line,
if they want to find your information, they will find your information. Exactly. It's more about making yourself a target than anything else, I think.
Exactly. And it's
that's why I've always hidden in plain sight. I've never done any. I've always been real name. I don't, mostly because I am too ADD to maintain alts, and I know that I would muck it up. I just know myself, and there's no point, because I would just forget to. There was that gaming leaker recently who just replied with his official account, but he was, and now he's in big trouble.
Oh yeah.
Because he was leaking games information that were under NDA. I can't remember who it was. And I just went, that would be me. I'd forget to log out and it would all be over. There's no point. I just know myself very well. It's like, I just know that. Exactly. But I also can tell people that, you do it, as long as you do the right thing for the most part. I think it can keep you accountable as well, in terms of making sure that when you speak with your real name and understand, you take it more seriously, I think.
And it's one of those things. I always am a big proponent of, whether it's private or whether it's public, you should always speak as to what you mean, and always act how you mean to act. And you should never say anything in private that you would not want to be public, because there is one day it is going to be public. Just act like it is going to be public, because someone that you trust now will betray you. I mean, over the stuff that I've seen over the past
Yeah.
5 years, you've had the closest friends and the people that say that they're there for you the whole time, and the second it becomes inconvenient for them, they turn on you
Oh,
and
yeah.
they leak anything that they think is damaging. So it's
Mm-hmm.
100%. It's like you can never shame the unashamed, is what I like to say.
Yeah.
It's if you're never acting in a way that you find shameful and you own everything you do, you have nothing to hide and you have nothing to be used
Yeah.
against you. Which we
Yeah.
see a lot of that stuff, and I think that's why Kiwi Farms was such a big target, was because they're showcasing all of the things that that people out there don't want to see, and
Yeah.
it's all this embarrassing stuff and all this stuff that people want to be removed from the internet and forgotten forever. And this is the first big step in that, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I do have a dilemma about that, because I do tend to also support things like the GDPR and principles like the right to be forgotten, right? I do think that that's important. And they are in conflict. Like, this is the problem, I think, with a lot of things, which is it's not or. Your operator's not or, it's always and, right? It's always, there's lots of things that are true at once. But at the same time, I want to be able to, that's something that I want to control. It's not something that I want others that the powerful corporations or government or even enemies or people with more power or clout, they don't get to tell my story. I get to
Exactly.
tell my story and control what's on there. And I think that that's been my big concern as well, because that was me. Like, I signed up as a awkward 14-year-old who, struggles with eye contact, as you can tell. But when I'm thinking, I'm sort of like, but, I was awkward. I didn't fit in. And I went on the internet and I found like-minded people and friends, and it was my escape. And I got to be free and, not shackled by any of this like nonsense that's in meat space. And but I can't remember what my point was.
No worries.
Just so that people know, it's 7:00 in the morning here. I've been up since 5. So it might take me a little while, but
No
I'm
worries.
ADD as hell. But what was the last thing you said? I had a good point there. I can't remember what it was.
No, I was just talking about how Kiwi Farms was basically one of the few places left on the internet that
Yeah.
showcases this stuff.
Yeah. And that's why you end up having to defend this stuff, because people don't realize that sometimes it's the way that I was trying to, I'm still trying to pass so much of what's happened, because it has sort of, it's very complex, because you've got to be, and this is what you were saying about saying what you mean and meaning sort of what you say and clarifying if you need to clarify. Which is, I try to make sure that when I'm saying something, I'm precise about what I'm criticizing. Like, that's going to be misunderstood.
Of
right?
course.
But that's not my fault. But making sure that I'm clear about what I'm criticizing. So I can criticize Cloudflare's action and I can criticize Kiwi Farms' behavior, and they're not necessarily, it's not, you can't, it's not 1 and 0.
They're not exclusive to each other, yeah.
Yeah, but with Kiwi Farms, it's like I said, I always end up defending the people that are unsympathetic, because those are the test cases for those that, like with Kiwi Farms, regardless of how you feel about their conduct, they were accused of something that they didn't do. Doesn't matter if they did other stuff or you don't like them, or a lot of my thing was, I hope you're never accused of a crime you didn't commit. Like, a principle of law and democracy, it's not even American law. This is a fundamental thing about rule of law, is that you are only charged and tried for the crime that you're only tried for the crime you were arrested for, and nothing else. You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
way
they're
it should be.
generally like, yeah, and it's like, okay, well, there needs evidence and it needs to be brought before, a jury or, whatever. But you can only be charged with, you're only on trial for like one charge, or
Exactly.
it doesn't matter what you did here. That doesn't make you guilty of XYZ charge. Like, that's a fundamental principle of democracy and rule of law. And it's like, okay, well, Kiwi Farms might be unpalatable. I find it funny, but that's because I think, again, people's thresholds are pain tolerance levels for internet stuff are different, right?
Exactly.
I can see, let's just say the optics aren't good. But it's also a source of information, right? But again, it's like, well, they didn't do what they were accused of, and it was such a disproportionate response. As in, like Josh had his Google Voice account removed. They're sort of hounding him across the internet. He's being, like it's, and also there's like a cybercrime being committed, and everyone is just ignoring that.
And they're just
and that was the thing that I'm like, hey.
And I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know if you saw the
concerning.
recent updates about the same mob trying to shut down his mailing address, shut down his bank accounts, shut down, get his lawyers to stop representing him. It's to an nth degree, and this is literally criminal behavior at this point. Like it's to a point where it's beyond reasonable.
Yeah, and it's like, well, okay, there can be a case here for taking down the site, maybe, okay? Or it's more about making sure that there's a process in place, and that it's a fair process that everyone agrees to. Regardless of sort of political identity or whatever, right?
It's applied
there
equally.
Has to be something that's
got to be across the board.
It applies equally. And it's not in practice, right?
No, of course.
We all live in capitalism. We know that but it's the best we've got, right? For now, until we figure out ways to coexist together, which is not going very well so far.
No, historically it doesn't.
Seems to not be going terribly well. I mean, who knew that 7 billion people trying to get along is difficult? But, but at the same time, I think that we have to get back to, this isn't like a defense of liberalism, and that's something that annoys me about a lot of this debate is, again, Americans sort of the classical liberal type sort of defending these things, because it's not necessarily, it's just, we've got to get back to fundamental principles about freedom and what that means. And that it's not necessarily, an American definition of freedom is not necessarily accurate or desirable for most people. So anyway, sorry, I just wandered off, but it's just the fact that they've been charged with something that they charged, figuratively speaking, and punished, having never been arrested, having never, all of these things, I just find it bonkers, absolutely bonkers that there's no adults going, it's too far. I'm very disappointed in Cloudflare for this.
It's ridiculous. I mean, we've been seeing this, like this channel has been covering it for this type of stuff for like years now. Like I've been doing, like I have about 2 years worth of podcasts, but we've been covering stories like this for the past like 4 or 5 years. And it's to a point where people can literally just make something up, speculate around on different random anonymous forums, use themselves as reference points, go to the media, have the media signal boost that, and then use that as leverage to go around and delete people's lives.
And this is what
handbook. There's literally a handbook.
Well, yeah, it is a playbook that's sort of it's just escalated and escalated since I mean, can I talk about how I first became aware of Kiwi Farms as a community, right?
Yeah.
I'm not on the forum. I don't endorse that sort of behavior. I grew out of that stuff, right? That was old internet when I was, like we were not our best selves when we were young.
That was the B-board.
Yeah, I wasn't on Kiwi Farms, but I was on older versions. That was normal. That was just internet blogging, like back in the day, right? I sound like I'm 100 years old when I talk about this, but back in the war. But I first came across Kiwi Farms over Jessica Yaniv. So Bill C16, that was back in 2017. So how long this has been going on. And I always been a trans ally, and I just want, we've got to pause for a second and think about again, I just go, okay, there's an exploit. I don't agree with this. I think there's going to be, first of all, there's going to be a conservative backlash against this again. I saw all of what was going to happen, right? I just went, we need to sort this out. I underestimated how that would, I was just like, this is, I don't know why, I'm always just drawn to something because I think there's like a problem. You know, like I'm just sort of drawn there. Does that make sense? Like I go,
it's like a
okay, and
train
then I,
wreck. You just know.
yeah, it is like that. But then I end up knowing everything about this super niche issue, but it ends up being a bigger issue of
Mhm.
speech, or it ends up being something that, yeah. Anyway, but I became familiar of that. And if you're familiar with kiwi farms, you'll know that Jessica Yaniv was one of the sort of lol cows, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it was a valuable source of information on the case at the time, because tech had, again, for better or worse, I'm not going to go into the weeds on the actual issue.
Mhm.
That's the problem, is that it tends to derail.
Oh, it goes. Yeah.
But yeah. And I just went, like there's an issue of this can be misused.
Mhm.
And it has been, and it just gets worse. And, every time it comes around, it gets more aggressive.
Mhm.
People get more afraid. Like, I don't blame anybody for not speaking up with kiwi farms. I didn't expect anyone to.
Mhm.
Because if you've been across a lot of these culture wars issues before, most people just want to keep their heads down. Because we've come out of COVID, where there was a lot, again, not about the issue, but about the censorship,
Mhm.
suppression, all of those sorts of things that there's a trend here, which is that there's a let's just say a class of sort of journalists, a sort of inner circle, who are sort of dictating a narrative. And if you fall
Mhm.
afoul of that narrative or those interests, unless you have been on the receiving end of that, I don't think you realize how big that whiplash is, or how big that backlash is, against, you know what I mean? You get what I'm saying?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so there's people I underestimated. I just went, I thought, okay, I was like, I don't think Megan Murphy should be banned. I was like, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. And 5 years later, I'm just still wading through all of this, like the
It's
consequences of just saying something like that. And I was like,
the
oh my God, like
consequences of saying literally anything on the internet has just
yeah,
gone to the nth degree at this point. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the whole Yaniv situation, like I didn't know about that
Mm,
until people that I'm friends with that have accounts on the farms brought it to my attention, because like I live in the country
mm,
that this is happening in,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
on the other end of the country for me, but we don't hear anything
yeah,
about it on this end. It is not made national news. It has not been talked about, and this is like someone that
yeah.
apparently like ridiculously brought it up as a human rights issue, and like has done all
Mm.
sorts of ridiculous nonsense and it appears to be that they are
Funny.
it's hilarious.
I
It,
love me a troll. I just do. I can't help myself.
this
I
is
like
like
funny people.
this is like a living like a living
Eric
in the
Cartman.
flesh 4chan troll in real life. Like this is a
Yeah.
person that is going out of their way. Like they clearly have some sort of a humiliation fetish or something, because they
Mm,
enjoy being talked about. They enjoy being the center of attention. They know they're
yeah.
ridiculous, and they enjoy
Mm,
that anyways. But they want to make as everyone around them as uncomfortable as possible. And we see this with like most
mm,
of the people that are featured as like lol cows, right? Anyone that's
mm.
brought up in that conversation, like and God, heaven forbid I'm going to get blasted for this, but like the Ethan Ralph of the situations here. Ethan Ralph
Mhm.
loves that stuff too, because he can monetize the hell out of that. He makes a lot of money off of that. With Chris Chan, just
Tim
like
Pool
rebels.
monetizes it very well.
Yeah.
He's someone who impresses me, because he actually does it better than most people that I can,
He
like, to his
really
credit.
does.
Like, I have a lot of beefs with Tim Pool
Tim
politically,
Pool is
but I am impressed at how he monetizes his haters.
yeah.
It's impressive.
It's
Um,
that is
again,
like the gold standard, right? Like
mm,
it's amazing. Like you can see all of these people that go out of their way to be the villain on the internet, right? And like
mm.
I can say I'm a bit guilty for that myself,
But
because I
there's
enjoy
money
the
in it.
heel heat. Like I don't mind being the villain. I don't
Mm,
mind being the heel.
no.
I can play the heel very well, and I've done it.
Mm,
I've done it for a number of things. But it's like when you have people attacking you, the best thing that you can do, instead of just wasting energy fighting back, is just use their momentum to your advantage.
oh, yeah.
It's take the judo
That's the
approach.
true fans principle, basically, right?
Yeah.
I used to consult on all of this stuff. I actually built my career on this, consulting specifically on polarizing and polarization. If you know who your customers are,
Hmm.
you also know who they aren't. you
Exactly.
can use that to your advantage. Like that was a workshop that I ran like back in, gosh, early 2000s. This is how early, talking about this type of stuff, which is that if you can figure out how, you're not going to get, you just want your 1,000 true fans. Have you heard about that theory before?
I've briefly touched
Which is
on it.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was famous for musicians at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than going mainstream and sort of being at the behest of a label and trying to go mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
basically for a musician, because that's a lot of work, a lot of fame. The true fans principle was basically what you've got to do is just focus on finding 1,000 true fans. If you've got 1,000 people who will buy anything that you produce, they're loyal. They will come to your shows. They will do anything. You can make a good living as a musician without
Exactly.
any of the shit that goes with being in a label, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the principle of internet freedom, which was that you saw, like Louis C.K., you saw a number of artists who got that early and did really well from it, who went direct and they sort of bypassed. But then what happened was, again, a lot of this is like the major labels, and there's so much history here with the major labels, and they just came in and ran roughshod on all of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just went, okay, they saw that they couldn't control, artists and the industry. Artists were starting to figure out. Sorry, I did a lot of work with musicians
Mm-hmm.
and sort of celebrities on the online early on, right? So I started to. This is fundamental to polarization, because this is something that we played with and dabbled with, and I did as well. And I didn't even think about the sort of other side of it,
Mm-hmm.
like the monetizing of haters,
Yeah.
how that might turn toxic. It's not necessarily something that we thought of.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like it
Well,
was just
it's
sort of a thing where you go, oh yeah, everyone's in on the joke. Everyone, it's like, yeah, we're, like flame wars. They were always good natured. And I think that was, again, gather around the campfire, children.
mm-hmm.
But there was always a good natured aspect to online flame wars early on. Yes, they got intense. Yes, they got religious. They were like snarky and stuff, but they never went to this degree
And I think
where
that's a big
you
one.
could actually, yeah, there was always a good, and again, this could be, I'm glossing over some stuff, of course. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, but I am absolutely horrified at how commonplace swatting and doxing is on Twitch.
It's wild. It is absolutely
I
wild.
didn't know much about like how much like Gen Z particularly, like how normalized this behavior is. There was always some sort of weird social contract with the early internet where there's places you didn't go.
Mm-hmm. And you just
And
kind of,
it's very,
it's gone now. There's
yeah.
no line anymore.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, we've been given these tools and they're very powerful. And just to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. And the problem is that people like us who are sort of fighting this sort of final line, we're fighting for it, not because of we necessarily agree with online harassment or anything like that.
No, of course.
I'm not that silly, right? But we're fighting it because I just see the consequences of this, which is that one of the things. Oh, sorry, my brain just faded. I was just finishing a thought, but ADHD. Sorry, fine. Just go with it. What was I going to say? I'll come back to it. All right.
No worries.
Think about it.
Well, I think something important I wanted to take a draw from that is we've seen it for many, many years, right? We always have the mutual benefit from a lot of the stuff that's going on, right? So we have like the quartering, for example. He made a lot of money off of covering the Anita Sarkeesian outrage and all that other stuff, right? And conversely, Anita Sarkeesian and all those people made a lot of money, guffawing and, oh my God, the quartering's attacking me. They both made money off of each other. Neither one of them wanted the other to stop.
Absolutely.
Like it's
a crackhead marriage.
Everything. we see it's a weird marriage dichotomy, right? Because they're married to each other. It's like Batman and Joker, right? Can they really exist without each other? The Joker gets rid
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
Batman. What can the Joker do at that point, right? When you look at it, it's like these are two things that exist because the other one exists, right?
Hmm. And that
Michael
is that
Myers.
dynamic between, yeah, yeah.
And
Sorry,
no
I think
worries.
there's a slight delay. So if I talk over you, that's why. I think there's, yeah, slight delay.
Well,
So
we are broadcasting across the world, so it's kind of
yeah, exactly. It's just not good enough. It's not fast enough for
not
me.
fast enough.
See, this is the thing. The internet is fantastic for this.
Yeah.
But I think, like anything, there's a flip side to. We just need to figure out a way to deal with it. But I'm just surprised that the adults in the room have acted so blindly and egregiously. That's the thing that concerns me, because the internet's going to internet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing about these cancellations or this playbook that you talk about, like scammers. If you've been on the internet for any length of time, there's always like affiliate marketers and MLMs and cults, and like the
Absolutely.
KKK has always been online. All these hate communities have always been there. What we've got is that these are somehow, well, not somehow. I mean, if you've read your Chomsky, you know how. But there's all these incentives in place where people are not necessarily doing the right thing because they don't want to get rid of. We want to need to set some norms, but also like the grown-ups that are in charge,
Mm-hmm.
the grown-ups that are apparently me. Apparently we're Gen X are grown-ups.
Apparently.
Maybe we just forgot. But for some reason, there's no real gatekeeping or of the process. So for me, it's like, well, I don't look to Twitter people. Twitter people are going to be idiots. I look to the lawmakers to make sure that that stuff is robust and the systems are robust. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Like,
you can't look to law
and that's
to.
the failure for me.
You can't look to law to.
Sorry?
You can't look to law to do anything logical anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so far
No.
behind on technological advancements. It's like they are
Oh,
allergic
it's
to getting up to speed and getting everything where it needs to be.
But even on LinkedIn, like I've got like a lot of IT and tech people in my circles,
Mm-hmm.
and their level of conversation is still like, "Here's why you should have a website." So if you think that if I need to sell you the benefit of a website in 2022, I'm sorry, but you don't deserve to be a business.
No,
Like, what the fuck? Sorry,
exactly.
it's my language. I'm sure you don't mind,
No,
but
it's perfectly fine.
but it's just like, what the hell is like? That's the level of, because I also know, because I was on the other. I'm not necessarily. I'm political now, and I was always sort of politically like trained, all that stuff. But I was in the business world as well. And I had to sit there and pitch to CEOs or CMOs on digital strategy, and their level of understanding. They're not, like marketers aren't clever people generally, right?
No.
Um, th- and they're very tactically minded. They're not thinking about the consequences of this. I was always the lone voice going, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think necessarily you seeing humans as things to nudge or people numbers on a spreadsheet is necessarily the best idea at scale, like politically. Like I started, all this Cambridge
Yeah.
Analytica
Yeah.
stuff. I just saw it happening early on. And no one would listen. Like I was in these rooms and I'd go, guys, because engineers just want to make cool shit. They don't care, right? Did you watch the interview with Zuckerberg and Rogan? And I'm sympathetic to him because he's just an engineer who likes making cool shit.
Mm-hmm.
He gets visibly anxious and stressed when he has to think about anything other than making cool shit. You can see, right? I'm married to a software engineer guy. They're my bread and butter. I love them to bits, but they're not good with people shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always like being in a room with engineers who were like, oh, we can do this with the data. We can do this with the data. And then all the big banks and all the big retailers and all that stuff is sort of circling like sharks around these
Yeah.
engineers, trying to get them to manipulate data.
Exactly.
And I've seen all of this stuff happen. I've been in those rooms and I just went, no, I also know that it was not only a blind spot, but also they wouldn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's just like, anyway, I know it's got off the rails, but I sit there and I go, okay, there's a failure here. Yeah. Like there's a massive failure here because I thought Cloudflare would get that. That was the thing. Like, I think I was let down by Cloudflare because
you thought you got it from their statement, like when they initially came out and said, like, this is we have to make a stand because this is like the final straw. If we do this, it sets a
Yeah.
dangerous precedent, blah, blah, blah. And then they fell back on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it doesn't mean I don't understand why. And I can't say that I wouldn't make the same decision if it was my business. I imagine it's the same playbook again, which is that, if you can't pressure them sort of from the bottom, you pressure from the top. It's kind of, it works as a multifaceted pressure campaign. They sort of massage networks and, all that sort of stuff. And again, it's no particular group of activists. It's just, in this instance, it happens to be like the trans activists and Keffel's mob, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it could be any other kind of, again, it's just a loophole that it can be exploited for any purpose. Oh, that's what I was going to say before,
Mm-hmm.
which is that I've been talking about this playbook that you talk about. It's a discrete set of steps. Like, it's easy. I can see how you do it, like how you get around all the political advertising guidelines on how you can slip around all of it, because I've done all of this work for most of these years. But it's a playbook, but the problem is, and this is the dynamic between sort of the Democrats, Republicans in the United States. This is a very US dominated conversation.
Yes.
That's the elephant in the room, first of all. Second of all, there's no left and right in the US. They're all right wing. Third of all, it's that it's a playbook, but the reason why no one will address it, like, this is why I see right through the sort of the sort of the US right as well, because there's this discrete playbook, but they won't address it because they want to use it on their opponent.
Well, what if I told you?
And so it's more like a shared interest in. It's like an open secret that you do this certain MLM radicalization sort of funnel, and no one will address it. No one will legislate or correct it because they want to be able to use it to win. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's 100% correct. But what if I told you that it wasn't a secret playbook? What if I told you that
it's not secret.
There is literally a book that's been printed and is out there on how to do this stuff? Have you heard of
I've seen variations of it. It's Organizer's
Have you heard of the book How to Destroy a Man Now?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all of those things.
It meticulously details exactly how to go about this stuff and how to protect yourself legally from blowback by getting someone who is completely insolvent to make a statement, and then you quote that statement, and then all of a sudden you're magically not liable legally because I'm just quoting what somebody else said. That other person's the reason for this.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it employed so many times.
Yeah, and see, I just this is why I think the final frontier has to be at the institutional process level, because I think people get so heated about the individual issues. They all want to use those tactics against the sort of outgroup or an enemy or someone they perceive to be an enemy. It's such a huge problem. And the last is just making sure that protecting due process is the hill you have to die on.
Absolutely.
It's not even necessarily speech. Like in Australia, I'm sure Canada is, I think you're similar. We're ruled largely by convention. The social contract is sort of speech as rights by default, and the laws are the exception, right? It's not the codified laws of the rights in the United States. It's not like you have rights, here you go. We actually have rights by default. And then we legislate so that's why we've always said we don't need a Bill of Rights necessarily, because we have it by default. If you get to the High Court, that's the ruling, is we have all of these rights by default. There's exceptions in these instances. So it's a kind of backwards thing that Americans don't understand because it's not explicitly said, right?
Well, it's not explicitly said in Canada either. However, we don't actually have baked-in protections, oddly enough. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protect
you do, because you're a part of the Commonwealth.
Yes. But we are also rejecting the Commonwealth largely right now because of the new king.
Common law is still But I know it's not, but it's not codified much. Oh, Australia and Canada are similar, like, which is that we take a lot of, like, Magna Carta is our Bill of Rights, like it's because we sort of are heavily, I don't know how your High Court has gone there. I imagine it's in the same direction, but ours has very much said, I'm sorry, but like, this is, you have these things as under common law. The precedent exists through, things like Magna Carta of all things, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very case law heavy, and it depends and case by case. And And anyway, I could go into fucking nerd. It's so boring for people. I just go, no, but I sit there as this big misunderstanding with America and the way that, well, first of all, anyway, doesn't matter. Americans.
I have some people I'd love to get you in touch with, because they're much more versed on law in the U.S. and Canada than I am. So, but that's for a different day.
Yeah. No, one of my big things is just trying to explain. Like my thesis, was on whether we should have a statutory Bill of Rights in Australia. So I know this topic actually inside out, and a lot of it is that we looked at it because the way that we work is that we don't have I think people just misunderstand how law works as well,
largely,
which is that there's no one piece of legislation that determines a thing. Like your rights. It's an interaction between lots of different policies. Some policies conflict with other policies. All of these things, they all conflict with each other. And this is the problem, I think, with Twitter discourse in general, is that you can cherry pick anything to form a narrative, right?
Absolutely.
I've watched people just do that with psych studies where they go, oh, internet is addictive. And the internet's like, well, no, that's contested. There's other studies that indicate, it's like, no, we there's different aspects to this, right? And you can use studies to form any kind of conclusion or manufacture any kind of policy outcome that you want. And this is, I think that this is just not a problem. Again, this will come back to what I think about.
Yeah.
This is why we have to have the systems and the processes in place with people who know what they're talking about, who aren't afraid, who will, it's not a worship necessarily of institutions. It's that most people don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
We need to get back to electing and putting people in power that have an understanding of how the things work, and not and not abusing it to make things work the way that they want to. I think largely, in Canada, I can speak very, very clearly on this. Canadians have absolutely no fucking idea how our government works. They have zero clue. They have no idea what the federal responsibility is. They have no idea what the provincial responsibility is. They have no idea how much power.
You guys are a federal setup too, aren't you? Like us.
I think so.
The provinces are somewhat like states.
Yeah, provinces are their own, but they're basically their own nations.
So it's roughly a federation. I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, it's a confederation. Where it's basically our premiers are the god of our province. Like they can say and do whatever the hell they want, and they don't have to listen to federal at all. Like federal can be like, oh, we suggest that you should probably treat your people nicely, and our premiers can turn around and say, go fuck yourself. We're going to do what we want.
So it's very similar to us, where the states premiers have more, again, it's that default power goes to the states, and the federal government coordinates and I imagine they've used international powers loopholes the way that they have here to sort of,
absolutely
impose more stuff.
Well, we saw that
so you've got similar conflicts.
When COVID hit, our premier literally declared a state of emergency and just had God powers to do whatever he wanted. He could shut down whenever. He could write any restriction he wanted. He could.
Oh, Trudeau.
No, that wasn't Trudeau. That wasn't Trudeau. That was Doug Ford.
Oh, wasn't it?
It was Doug Ford.
Oh, sorry. I thought you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Trudeau did declare an emergency over the country, which allowed different things for them to write in for like international stuff. So like in terms of putting restrictions on border crossings, that was federal, but putting restrictions on how businesses could run, how many people could be in business, all that stuff, that was provincial. So for us in Ontario, that was Doug Ford. So all the stuff that you guys hear about internationally, that's largely to do with our premiers, nothing to do with our federal government. Everyone blames Trudeau because of like the Alberta premier's doing something or the Ontario premier doing something. It's literally not anything he can do. It's the funniest part.
There was no way to run this thing.
No.
That was going to. One of my favorite words, and it is Zugzwang, which is the German word in chess for no winning move.
Exactly.
Right? There is no, and this was like that's what this was. And same thing with Kiwi Farms. There was just. There's no real winning moves here, and being more other than being truthful and charitable and trying to push through. Like those are the only, like COVID's actually, like I'm in Western Australia. I don't know if you heard. Apparently, we're a fascist dictatorship. Because we just locked our border. We just went fuck you, cut the borders down, and went nah. I have a weird survivor's guilt because we were largely, up until sort of recently,
Mhm.
unaffected because we basically went, "Nah, till we've got a vaccine, you can all stay out."
Well, isn't that why
We just
isn't
had
that why
that.
nature's punishing you by setting the entire country on fire at this point?
Oh, yeah. It was just no, but it was funny to see that, like, the Australia has fallen stuff, and
It's so
because it was
strange.
just like, "You idiots,"
It's
because,
so
like,
strange.
literally the things that they said were concentration camps
Yeah.
were like mining camps, like people who earn $250,000 a year stay there. They're like the fly in, fly out mining like there's accommodation. It's not concentration camps, man. They're like,
It's
it's
so
luxury
crazy.
accommodation. It's like, fucking hell.
If
It's
you
quite funny.
if we believed everything that some random username on Twitter said about our countries,
Oh,
like
Jesus.
you'd believe that it's like the third coming of Hitler on every single
Oh,
facet of the planet right
yeah.
now. It's
It's
absolutely
also
wild.
mostly bots.
It is mostly
A
bots.
lot of it is bots.
It is mostly bots.
I think people underestimate how much they're being nudged just and talking to bots
Oh,
or
absolutely.
AI that are having, like, conversation trees. Like, I think in one of my streams, I actually quickly went on to showed Watson and how you and IBM, how you can just build a chatbot in a few minutes,
Hmm.
and you can just make conversation trees for whatever, and if you wanna do that with the Twitter API, it's very easy to do, and I don't think people understand the level of sophistication there. But also there's a level of sophistication with that, but it's also very stupid in another aspect, which is moderation.
Hmm.
So there's like that really the AI sort of thin line here as well,
Hmm.
where we both put too much faith in AI and not enough. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Not
Well,
enough.
we're expecting AI
As in,
to go and recognize, like, quote unquote illegal means of communication on sites and things like that, and go ahead and moderate billions of tweets at once, so that no human can do, it just physically can't do.
no, it's
And
not
we're
possible.
expecting AI to do this, but AI is easily exploited and easily manipulated, and
Yeah.
we don't do enough to mitigate that.
Well, again, this is why process matters, right? This
Hmm.
is why, like when I think that this is really just a normal process. They went through this in this like 18th century with printing press. None
Exactly.
of these battles are actually new, and yellow journalism took over then as well,
Hmm.
right? And that's what we've got now. It's just that new case of yellow journalism, right? With all these like people who, because you can't really, because good journalism is first of all expensive.
Hmm.
They're incentivized to write crap, right?
We get
And also
monetized, but
the,
you get the
hiring the
views.
cheapest people,
Yeah.
right? They're hiring the people, and again, because of the industry that I came out of, which is the, digital, marketing, all that sort of stuff industry, is that that, like, how much brands are willing to pay for content. You
Absolutely.
know how that there's always also I know that it's a race to the bottom, which is that there's always someone more desperate who wants the gig, who will,
Who
do
will
the job.
undercut.
And
Hmm.
it's not even about ethics. It's actually just about the fact that there's always that you're replaceable. There's always someone
Exactly.
that will be willing to write bullshit for money, right? Again, you can't look at this outside capitalism. It's a failure of capital. But
It's true.
it's just this is where the conversation. Sorry, am I dominating the
No,
conversation?
this is what I
um,
intended. Like, it's what I want to
I
have
just
happen.
get going.
I want
And
my
start
guests to talk more
rambling.
than I do, because it
Um,
makes jobs easier for me. So.
yeah, I know. Um, but it's yeah, I just find people are just so distracted with they're in the weeds, and again, that's gonna happen, but I'm sitting there, like, for the last 5 years, I've said, like, "Are there any grown-ups in charge?" And it might just be that I'm supposed to be one of the grown-ups, and I forgot. Like,
Hmm.
maybe Gen X we just forgot to take over, and we're going, "Okay, we're looking to leaders," and we were too busy, like, we forgot,
You are the leaders now.
and then the sorry? Yeah, well, yeah, I had to quit. Like, I actually reached a point coming back to I actually felt like I could not continue to do, um, content marketing or digital stuff or UX or anything like that in the current state. I just felt like there was just too much harm,
Hmm.
and also the race to the bottom, like I said, which is that
Absolutely.
everyone I found it increasingly difficult to compete.
Hmm.
My costs were being like blown out. I was being, like if you had any ethics, like I tried to set up a digital advertising agency. We ran one for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, there's things we won't do. I won't install sort of spying stuff. I won't collect certain data. We are an ethical agency. We will do good work. We do, excellent work.
Absolutely.
We are craftsmen, blah, blah. And the demand wasn't there. So I had obviously had some good clients, but they still just wanted you to just do the stuff and
Mm-hmm.
and meet the KPI. And they didn't care. Like they work 12 hours a day. They're in meeting after meeting after meeting, and nobody's really thinking about what they're doing
No.
and the bigger picture. And again, it's just that's why the process and institutions and those things are just so paramount. Like that loophole, I call it the cats against Trump strategy. I don't know if you've heard about this one.
I've not heard that one yet.
As part of that playbook, this is the nudging the needle strategy for political campaigning. It's the organizer's handbook like stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also there's a loophole. If you've run an agency or run Facebook ads at all, the agency has a master account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you run all of that stuff on behalf of your clients. But what I saw that they were doing was actually setting up all of these like pop-up digital agencies where they'd have 10 clients. One of them was a political PAC. One of them's all these corporations. One is a bunch of 501c4s and all that sort of stuff. But they're all clients of the agency.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is pooling their ad spend. Okay. But what that advertising agency then does is allocate it to like $1,000 a week, $1,000 a month campaigns. So they sit under the radar. So even though they're if you're interested, go to the Facebook ad library and have a look at how they were sort of staying under the radar with the dark money stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
With advertising. And what they do is they were running sort of $1,000 a month, which no one's looking at, right?
Exactly.
But they would run 100 of them. So they're spending $100,000 a month on political advertising,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all small things. And they're also running little stores like Jen Psaki socks. Cats Against Trump was I call it the Cats Against Trump because it's such an example of that, which is, again, the Democrats and Republicans use the same playbook.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And it's the playbook that I fight, but it's just the disinformation playbook. It's big tobacco shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a set of merch that had Cats Against Trump. It was illustrated. So they create a merch item, they set it up as an online store, with Printful or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they just create all of those, and they create these microsites and fan pages for clients of these digital agencies who have the master account, and they allocate the ad spend. And I went, well, okay, well, you need to understand how this all works at the operational level. But because one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, they go, there's a massive loophole here. Do you know who does know this? And that's Mark Zuckerberg. And that's why he laughs his ass off every time they don't do anything, because he knows what they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I could make a lot more money doing this kind of work, but I just saw all of these things, these holes that just weren't being plugged. And so I went, I can't compete in this space. I can't compete because it's always going to be someone who's willing to do evil shit. And
that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And this is why you can't. And again, we're just going to loop this back to, because all this stuff is relevant, right? You can loop it back to kiwi farms.
Oh yeah, it doesn't seem relevant.
It doesn't seem relevant. However, kiwi farms was not built explicitly to be evil, right? They don't have.
No, it's just a forum.
It's just a forum. It's just a forum that as far as I understand, and don't get me wrong, I have no love lost for the kiwi farms. Josh and I apparently have some sort of bitter rivalry. He's called me out publicly on Twitter over some really ridiculous things. So I don't have love lost over the website not existing, but I do have love lost over the assault on liberty. But the point is that kiwi farms was not explicitly built to be a weapon of mass destruction against people. It was just created as a website for Josh to make friends on and have fun. That's pretty much all it came down to.
Yeah,
and then you have people who join it to use it in a certain way, much like the ad space on Facebook that you're talking about. You have people who are malicious and find ways to use it maliciously. That doesn't mean you can look at any sort of thing and apply that to anything. It's like, okay, well, If you make a wrench, well, if someone goes and buys your wrench because your wrench is the biggest, heaviest wrench on the market that can get the job done heavy duty, and they go out and they just like brutally murder a whole bunch of people, does it mean it's your wrench's fault, or does it mean it's the person that's using the wrench?
Yeah.
Right. You can use that for anything, and the fact that, and this is one thing I wanted to say. It's like when we were inviting in my convention back in 2020, we ran a convention called Kitchener Comic Con. We watched the entire fiasco. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Vic Mignogna and the whole fiasco with Funimation and him losing his job with them and over false allegations and stuff like that. Long ongoing story.
I imagine it's much the same sort of story that has
very similar. Some random person on Twitter made reference to Vic Mignogna doing something incredibly inappropriate and misidentified him as being somebody else because somebody else actually did it, but they applied it to him. And then when people were saying, actually, no, Vic didn't do that, then some big name voice actors jumped on and signal boosted it. Long story short, it didn't turn out too well for Vic in the end of that. But the point is like when we're looking at stuff like this, we watched the whole thing go down. We invited Vic to the convention. We had the entire internet come down on our heads. This is where I look at Cloudflare, okay? And I look at Cloudflare and anybody and any other convention out there. I'll say this to these people: these people don't exist, right? The massive online internet mob doesn't exist. I was the sole contact,
and they're not customers.
And they're not customers. I was the sole contact. I was the sole person handling social media. We were a tiny team of like 12 people running a convention. We had the entire internet crashing down on our heads. We had people attacking the city. People were attacking our city hall. Our people were attacking staff at City Hall, doxing them, threatening and like bringing out all sorts of details about their lives and threatening to go after their families because they weren't even involved. They were just the site that we were holding the convention at. They weren't even affiliated with us. And so like I was the only person social media savvy enough to handle all the blowback for it, and we survived it. We said no, we pushed back, I pushed back on all of it. I fought every single person that came on
and it
there.
does go away.
It goes away. It goes away when it shows that you're not going to back down. And so if Cloudflare out there would have just stood by their statement and whatever else, I was ready, and we as a team, like the small team that we were ready to let the entire convention burn down. We were ready to put it, you know what, this is the hill we are going to die on. If you want to kill us, if you want to destroy us, we can never hold another convention again, that's fine. Then destroy it, because we'll go down in history as being the one person that stood up to you and said no. Cloudflare had a chance to do that, and sure, they must have had like a ton of other clients and whatever else. Some big name clients that they're handling, that's fine. But the point is,
I don't think, because most of the IT guys I know would go this is like they're old internet people, and they're going, no, I don't know where this came from.
Yeah,
I think they just got corporate lawyers are the like.
Well, this is the thing. It's like
in-house legal.
If I'm Cloudflare. And if I'm the CEO, I'm the person making decisions at Cloudflare, and I don't care. I don't care about corporate think and all this other garbage. And I understand they're doing their best for their investors and whatever else. I don't give a shit about that. And this is probably why I'm not a CEO of a company, mind you.
Me too. That's why I was like, yep.
If I go out there and I have a bunch of random nobodies, like I have 90% bots coming at me on Twitter, screaming and screeching and making all these false stories and with no proof and no backup and everything else like that, and I have mainstream media coming after me, and I was, you know what? I'm dying on that hill. It's fine. You want to kill me? You want to pull my plug? Then do it. I'm not pulling the trigger. You're pointing the barrel. You're pointing the gun at me. I'm taking the barrel of a gun, putting it to my forehead, and say, pull the trigger, because you're going to do it in front of everybody, live time, like live prime time. You're doing it in front of the camera. You're doing and showing everybody in the fucking world how much of a monster you are. You're gonna execute an innocent person on camera, and it's gonna be you that pulls the trigger, and you that holds the consequences for it. But they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. They backed down just like everybody else.
That's the problem with the archive, right? Which is that you may not actually get the opportunity to be vindicated with time. If that's the chilling.
History's told us
may not get the opportunity to be right.
Exactly.
Because it can be wiped. Right. My stand for like I said about the record, like what happened. It's not necessarily about truth in the moment, even though that's ideal, but. Like if you understand like the United States history of sort of memory holding sort of Russian psychologists, for example, right? A lot of the stuff where they haven't been able to replicate certain like personality disorders and stuff outside of capitalism, right?
Exactly.
That's something that they sort of, because they've got so much power, they can memory hole these psychologists, and you don't get a fair cop, right? I mean, just the way, just alone the way they rewrite history around Marx, right?
Exactly.
It's like I've never seen so many resources. It's like he's obviously said something you don't like. That's a lot of a lot of money and resources spent, like making sure people don't read it.
And don't
But
remember
I'm just
it.
saying in general, like with historically,
Mm-hmm.
this is where it's quite precarious, especially when it's someone's person, like with Taylor Lorenz, with someone who's literally has a direct line to be able to get their tweets deleted,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So any misconduct or any poor behavior from one side, and they can, and that's the thing I think that concerns me too, because I think at the beginning of the discussion we talked about how there's no such thing as privacy necessarily, or
Mm-hmm.
that you don't want to say anything that, like I've got, there's nothing, if anything came to light, that there's nothing that I could think of that I would not, that, you know what I mean? I don't really
Yeah.
have skeletons as such.
Exactly.
But what worries me is that people can just
They can
make
just
it
make it
up
up at
and
this
make it
point.
true. And that was the thing about this sort of, the suicide stuff with kiwi farms. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
They didn't do that. And again, like, you might not like them, but that's not what happened.
No.
Like, it's not even just a matter of opinion, but the partner of those people, the partner of I can't remember the name now, said that it wasn't kiwi farms. They're lying, and people just run with it.
Yeah.
But they put it on Wikipedia and used the same, like, five journalists
The
as
same
sort of
5 people that
information
have been
mules.
making up things the entire time and sensationalizing it and using it for
Yeah.
clickbait the entire time.
Yeah.
And they use that as
But also,
like
you can't correct the record.
no.
If someone says something about you on Wikipedia and it's in a mainstream, like, press, right? And they just lie about you. And I've had Gizmodo wrote about me when I went viral years ago, right? Again, there's nothing horrible in there. I don't give a shit. But I'm saying I can see how this would destroy somebody,
Mhm.
which is that Gizmodo and those places can actually just decide to destroy someone, which I've seen it happen to various people over the years over this sort of culture war stuff. And you can't actually correct that.
No.
So you can't even be on, this isn't, here you go, here's another thing with Tim Pool where I'll give him credit, which is that they can just say something about him in the mainstream media. He can use his own videos as a source to say this isn't true.
Mhm.
They will consider that not a credible source
Exactly.
because it's not in the mainstream media. So you've already got this massive power imbalance, right? So this is why these things are so sacred. Like,
Well,
this is why this
we've already
thing
seen
is
something
so
similar.
egregious.
We've already seen something similar that got heavy criticism from the same people who are now pointing to the exact same thing, but on the other side of the fence. When Zoe Quinn made allegations against Alec Holoka, and there was no credible anything, there was nothing to back it up. She made up a complete lie of a story about what he did to her, about how he abused her, about how he did all this stuff to her, and basically tapped the shoulder of a couple of her friends that were involved in Gamergate, and they're like, yeah, you know what, that sounds true. That's true. He was creepy to me once, and he had everyone just stopped talking to him, and then he ended up taking his own life. There's no repercussions from that, and she got lauded. She got patted on the back. She got vaulted into stardom because she got rid of a bad guy. But meanwhile, you flip the other coin. She was literally directly responsible. Outside of being there and handing him the knife and doing it herself, she's directly responsible for that. Meanwhile, you have people going after Josh and Kiwi Farms because they're showcasing and they're reporting on people.
Yeah.
And they're not even like, they're discouraging people from going out and encouraging this stuff. They're discouraging people. They're banning people from interacting with these individuals. But that doesn't matter because that doesn't fit the narrative, right? It's
well, even like the Christchurch claims, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is that that's what changed my mind, because initially I was like, okay, Cloudflare, difficult. Kiwi Farms, yeah. All I saw was them, I only read it because I was interested in what was going on with Yaniv, because that was a fun little reality show. And that was where they were keeping track, right? And just every so often, if there's some big legal internet dispute or whatever, Kiwi Farms actually a really good resource for information, right?
A lot of it's bullshit,
and a lot of it's you know. But also I think people tend to underestimate how many people. Again, that's right, because a lot of the reason why people landed on Kiwi farms is because they've been censored elsewhere. It was one of those things where they've been, had a lot of the reason why it looks anti-trans, I think. I mean, from what I understand, a lot of trans people are on Kiwi farms saying,
That's
"Look
what
at these
I've heard
crazy
too.
fucks as well,"
A
right?
large swath of people on there that
So
are trans.
yeah, there's like trans mods and all that sort of stuff. But I can, again, the optics aren't good. But when track the history, it's like a lot of the gender critical women, whether you agree with them or not, landed on Kiwi farms after their subreddit was just taken down arbitrarily,
Yep.
right? Or after the various other things. And again, that's just one example that I've just been watching. But the same thing with the Donald, and the same thing with Chapter, all these places. It's like, I've said this before, like, where the fuck do the curious people go? Because
Exactly.
or people who just want to hang out. And it's like, okay, well, again, that's that prohibition thing. It doesn't work. Like, it just makes people go, because they're still going to want to do stuff, right?
They're just going to find
other
places
the
to
whole
go.
Yeah, but this is the void that the left, well, they're not even the left, but what people think is the mainstream left. There's a void there that keeps being filled by like the far right, because they're the only people that show up. And that's why I just stubbornly say, no, I'm not. I'm staying here. I'm staying put. I am not leaving the left. I'm staying put. And I'm here to stay. You get out, not me. You leave.
Well, and the goalposts keep moving.
I'm just saying.
Goalposts keep moving. It's like I started out as a left-leaning liberal, right? I started out there. Over the years, I've been moved more and more to the center. My feet haven't moved. Like, I've not moved at all.
Yeah.
And my beliefs and leanings are more center and libertarian than ever before. It's because like the one side just takes the goalpost and just runs with them. It runs away so far to the left, and it runs so far to the right. It's like, okay, well, what the hell's going on?
I don't think it's necessarily left-wing. Well, this isn't really left-wing, right-wing stuff. I think this is, again, where people, I think, get confused. I'm a socialist, right? And I believe that socialism is inherently democratic and libertarian, right? Those are just, if you're doing socialism correctly, those things are
ideally
what flow on from it, if you actually have an actual proper understanding of it. But I think, again, it's just that left and right have become brands and tribes.
Exactly.
That are opposed to each other, rather than, I mean, I'm just
sports teams at this point.
Yeah, but it's actually just more, I think, and that's why, because I get frustrated, because I go, that's not what socialism is, guys. Like, it's just a part of a toolkit, and the end goal is actually just how we coexist and keep everyone, maximum number of people, as happy as possible, and whatever works, right? That's just because you see it. I just happen to be a person with a politics degree as on top of this tech experience. So I just see things where I go, like, there's a misunderstanding here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. But yeah, so it's just very weird in that regard. But like, this is why I think that the policy and process matters just so much, because people are going to people. Americans going to Americate, corporations going to corporate, all those sorts of things. And so that's why Cloudflare really bothered me.
Well, and we don't see any.
They're supposed to be the sort of frontier for that. Like, DDoSs are going to happen.
Exactly.
Like, I remember a life before Cloudflare. Trying to keep a website up was they provide a tremendous service, right? And my trust is eroded there. I sit there and I go, that again, with the history of the internet, sort of, people who remember a life before services like Cloudflare, but also people are ignoring Taylor Lorenz works for the Washington Post, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Jeff Bezos owns. Did you know, like, CloudFront is a direct competitor, more expensive competitor to Cloudflare? And I go, is anyone going to ask the question about interests? It's not a conspiracy theory. I just got a question.
Well, and you'll be painted as a conspiracy theorist for thinking logically.
I get called a conspiracy theorist for pointing out, like, what happened.
Exactly. For pointing out reality. And here's the thing, right? Like, when you're looking at it, it's like there's been no retractions, there's been no follow-up, there's been no anything. When you have someone who's claimed that to be under fear for their life, and they are fleeing the internet somehow by running around the world. I don't know how you can when you're continuously logging into the internet, but that's besides the point. They're being chased from their home because of the internet. But meanwhile,
Yeah.
while they're saying this, they're live blogging, and it's like, oh, by the way, I'm here in Belfast, Ireland. I'm running from the internet. I'm so scared for my life, and here's my address directly. This is the pub that I'm going to be at in 2 hours. Like, it's literally.
I've been on the receiving end of a mob that was far smaller. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah, me too.
And I shut everything down and nearly considered changing my name at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speculating. I try not to get involved in like those details, but again, it doesn't ring like a normal response.
It really doesn't.
To being but again, there is no such thing as normal response. It could actually have just been checking in, and the way people use the internet is people have fucked up relationships with this sharing stuff. So I try to not judge too much there, because some people are just more inherently sort of into sharing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I used to be an oversharer, but then I grew out of that. Like, I realized that it wasn't a healthy way to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
But
I also think that there's questionable stuff, because stuff that's been shared linked back to a completely different website that is actually actively harming people.
Well, they weren't the source of the doxing.
Exactly.
And that's what I mean, is that
why don't they go after that? They go after the easiest target, I guess. But
no, I think it was because they were a target for the people who wanted it taken down. When you actually pay attention to who was cheering this on and covering it, they're all lolcow.
They really are. They really are. And the funniest part is they're attacking their own farm. And ironically, it's Kiwi Farms, but it's literally they're attacking their own food source. Like the lolcows are the only reason they're popular, the only reason they're making money, and the only reason that they're getting attention or whatever, that whatever currency it is, whether it's views or clicks or people talking about them, they love it. They they live for it. That's why they do it. As much as they say that they hate it and they pretend like their lives are terrible, like Dark Side Phil's making money hand over fist, like Ethan Ralph's making money hand over fist, and they're getting money because they're being covered this way. And so they cut off their food source. They burnt that farm down. It's gonna coast until the tank is empty. And this is, I don't think that they fully understand that yet.
But I think it also comes back to people just not knowing. I think people want influence, but they don't necessarily understand what the cost of that is.
Exactly.
Right. And that is that there's a reason why people like me sort of noped out of this influencer game early, because I saw that I was like, no, the cost is too great. In terms of your privacy, in terms of your relationships. Like, my relationship with my children is not so great because I used to overshare, like the mummy blogging thing. Like, like there's lessons that can be learned from sort of older internet people like myself. Just because we don't have influence like now doesn't mean we didn't, and doesn't mean that we haven't got some wisdom there.
Exactly.
Which is that you see the real impact. Like, I went through a divorce, like on Twitter, and that got very ugly.
That'd be brutal.
So it's like, but there's some wisdom there. But I think that's the thing that concerned me, seeing this sort of Keffel's destiny, like whatever clusterfuck is going on with Twitch at the moment, is that there's a whole generation of people who want fame and influence but don't have any idea what it actually means, what fame is, why celebrities are by and large fucked up, right? I've worked with quite a few. I've had friends who were high profile who have ended their lives because of Twitter harassment in the early days, because they were not, again, there's a real human cost, and people want all the trimmings of fame and influence without there's a flip side. There's no such thing as a free lunch, especially under capitalism. There's a big cost associated to any kind of success. And in my case, it's probably more that I like my life. I like my privacy. I like being able to live my values. And so to do that, you need to trade. We were talking about that before. If you don't want to be owned, you don't let yourself be owned. You can't have it both ways. That's how we get here.
Exactly.
Is that people gradually people don't just make a deal with the devil overnight. They kind of have their soul just gradually chipped away at. Over time, and it's just, and that with the Twitch stuff, I understand how people get there, but I think that they're not equipped. Like when
No.
at least when you were training as a journalist when you're younger, before the internet, before you even got in front of the mic on the radio, or before you even published anything, or before you got on TV, you were given intensive training
Mm-hmm.
on the responsibility of journalists, like all of the things, like, how to report on suicide, all these things. Those things exist for a reason.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that has these kinds of consequences, and also that not everybody is able to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone can, like some people, you see that happen.
All the
People
time.
who fall apart with, yeah. And sorry, I know I've monologued a bit, but
No, go for it.
I think that a lot of this stuff is the Kiwi Farms is the thing that goes with the territory of putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with, who was it that said this? But you don't go picking fights on the internet if you've got skeletons.
Exactly. Exactly
Like
true.
most people, yeah. I don't know what people expect. I don't know. It's like, how special. You're not that special that you the rules apply to you. Like it's very strange. But the thing that I found really interesting, I watched Keffel's stream on this last week, and she wasn't the source of the campaign. It wasn't her campaign.
No,
She was
it's not her
approached.
campaign. No.
And that's what, like, when I said,
her.
yeah. So when we talk, I think this was already just a waiting to strike opportunity, and just a bunch of shared interests, and that's concerning because that is effectively a conspiracy. Like, I sit there and I go, that's the definition of a conspiracy. Like,
fundamental definition of conspiracy, huh?
Exactly. It's like, okay, well, all right. Well, I'm a conspiracy theorist in this sense. Yes, because there was a conspiracy.
Well, we have people literally
really
going on, and someone went on Nick Rekida's podcast and literally admitted to it too. Like they literally admitted that they have been part of this conspiracy to illegally go after and take down information and try to remove someone's life and livelihood. Like, I don't know how more out in the open these people need to be. Like, it's at a point where, like, you can literally have insert cause here, as long as they're wearing the right color, go on live television and shoot somebody in the face and everyone would clap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's at that point now.
Yeah. And when you're on the receiving end of that, okay, I again, having sort of been through all of the things I've been through, this is why I say people are going to believe what they believe. You can't really necessarily change their minds.
Exactly.
Don't make yourself a target, but at the same time you can't. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be, people should be more aware that it can happen to anyone. Like being accused of a crime you didn't commit with no due process, because, like, even let's just say 98% of everything that is said about Kiwi Farms by Keffels is correct. Okay, let's assume that it's correct. We still have a concept of reasonable doubt, and there is enough reasonable doubt here to at least have it, like, reversed.
Exactly.
There's no presumption of innocence either. And again, I'm not saying that Cloudflare, Cloudflare again, there's lots of different intersecting issues here. It's not their job, but this is a failure of government.
And
right?
it's a violation of the protections that they're afforded.
Yeah. Yeah. And people who sit there and go, oh, but they're a private corporation. It's like, you're an idiot. Like, what world do you live in where it's like you say everything is political except the one massive corporation? It's like, what the fuck?
The corporation,
Marvel
TM,
movies
is not political.
The microaggressions of fucking, like, baklava is political, but this massive political overreach isn't. Like, what the fuck? Like, people are so dumb. But like, it's
so true though.
The content factory. Oh, it is. It's just like these. I think they're all solvable problems if people just grow
if they wanted them
how
solved.
many people?
That's a large problem. It's if they want them solved. That's the big issue.
Yeah. Well, they don't. There's enough interests. Like in international relations, like there's this thing called, it's like there's no allies, only interests, right?
Exactly.
And it's not so. And that's where the difference between conspiracy and analysis really is, that you understand that there's interests at play. There's facts, and you got to have, preserve some sort of democracy and rights and stuff through process. And a failure of that, and saying that that failed, is not a conspiracy theory. Where QAnon go wrong is that there's a little bit true, and they come to a batshit conclusion and overarching shit. Some of the stuff they talk about is just boring old international relations and securitization theory, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way that you look at it, and it's the conclusions you come to, and how much how much you look at the patterns. But again, I think these are all solvable problems, and they're not new problems.
They're not new. No.
They're just problems of scale and political will. That people, again, I know it sounds terrible, but I just can't see anything other than revolution being the thing that has to, not violent, obviously I don't call for those things, but I go, there has to be a fundamental shift.
Well, I think it seems to be heading in that direction, because like we've seen people now employ it against the Kiwi farms. We've seen people employ it against people like Alex Jones and Julian Assange and everything else like that. Now we're seeing it applied more feverishly at feverish pace now. There was and I haven't really looked a whole lot into it, mind you, but the big machine now is being pointed at the LGB Alliance, Lesbian, Gay, and Bi Alliance.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And they've had their PayPals canceled.
Yeah.
And because they had, dared to say the wrong thing.
That's been happening for years.
Yep. It's been happening for years. Like they dare to say wrong thing, and everyone, that's the first thing, because like you said, people didn't think that, we could just monetize people being mad, and obviously there's no way that the world could possibly turn that evil. But now that people have figured out, people are making money off of laughing at me, well, now they can't make any money at all. We're going to go after and make sure that they can't even have a bank account. They can't afford to have it. Like they can't have a house. We've been getting so close to the way that things are being run in the East right now, whereas like you can't say anything at all. Like if you drop a fucking hamburger on the street, like then all of a sudden, your bus pass is canceled, your job is like clearing all your shifts for the week. Like you're shamed so publicly to the point where the entire country just doesn't acknowledge that you exist anymore. It's getting to
I love that
point.
when they say, China has a social score. It's like, you think you don't.
And ironically, China's social score has a way to get back there where we don't. We don't have a way to get back there. We don't have a way to improve credit here in terms of social credit. We just once you're done, you're done. That's it.
Yeah. It's deeply worrying, and I think people don't realize how close to like full blown like techno fascism this we actually
absolutely
are in, and I think people just don't understand the history. Like I've mentioned the history of Aaron Swartz, right? Who was a free and open internet campaigner and guy like responsible for a lot of open technology like RSS, those sorts of things, Creative Commons, major formative role in sort of early internet like freedom. And he got like harassed so egregiously by the system, and like the trumped up charges and all this sort of stuff that came down at the same old shit, like, coming down on him like a ton of bricks, to the point where he, committed, he killed himself as well. Like there are literal, like there's dead bodies over a lot of this stuff.
There really is.
And I think people don't realize that this thing and that's why I feel like we've got to fight this fight, and and remind people of what's been taken from us and who we've lost along the way as well, and that how precarious a lot of this actually is, right? Because again, like I said before, like people don't understand how vicious this is until they find them. I think with COVID, I think a lot of people started to see. When they were sort of branded conspiracy theorists or branded like this, because they were like, I don't like wearing the mask, it makes it hard to breathe. It's like, you're anti-mask. It's like, no. Like I can't, obviously I've got to but I know I've got a few doctor friends who are like, I'm a little funny about this mRNA thing. Like it's a little new, messes with your DNA. But I can't say it. Because if I do, then I will be like, they basically lose their medical license for even asking. right, and that it's like, okay, so even people who would ordinarily wouldn't be sort of super online or, involved in this sort of niche stuff like the LGB Alliance stuff,
Mm-hmm.
when you get on the wrong side of this sort of thing or these interests, that like they have no idea what it's like. Okay, so I know a few people who've been destroyed by that machine. So it's if you've got empathy, you would not want to be in that position,
No, exactly.
right? Sorry,
Well,
can
and
I
it's
clarify for your audience as
yeah,
well?
yeah,
Just when I talk about certain interests and stuff, I just want to clarify it.
yeah.
I'm not talking about a gay agenda, or I'm not one of those people like the rainbow like thing. I'm talking about I feel that there is that, uh, there's a corporate benefit that's not being mentioned here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a money making opportunity, and I think again, you just need to halt and go, okay, where's a loophole here? I always go, okay, where's the exploit? I'm sort of a human like white hat hacker. I can see where
Well,
all of the
any time
potential
that the
exploits are,
government
and I go,
agrees with you, you have to question it because
yeah,
they never
yeah, no,
do
because I've got
anything
to
in
be
the interest.
careful about my language because I'm training as a psychologist, and
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm pro gender affirming care, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that I also have met surgeons who will, cut you open for money. I know this,
Oh,
right?
I've seen that. I've
It's
seen
just
that.
like, okay, yeah, and it's like I
It
want to
does
make sure that people,
do whatever. Like and
yeah,
like
like people with
as we talked about a little bit before we came on the stream, like, and I'll get into this a little bit here too. But the people that are going around and making an absolute mockery of what it's like to be trans or what it's like to be gay or
mm,
bi or what have you,
yeah,
it's just making it's making life so much worse, 10 times,
mm-hmm,
1,000 times worse than anything that Kiwi Farms or Josh could have done.
yeah,
Anything that these extremist people that supposedly are chasing a certain person around the world, it's that there is no. I can tell you right now, I could walk down the street right now. I can walk down the street right now and not have a single person even raise an eyebrow to me. I
yeah,
go at 3 a.m. in the morning, have no problems. Like, and people see my picture. People can see pictures of me. People can see videos of me. What have you? There is
yeah,
no largely no issues. I get the few yahoos every so often, sure. But largely, if I'm not out there, every single person that I pass, I'm like, hey, by the way, I'm trans. Hey, by the way, I'm trans. Hey, by the way, I'm trans. I'm not like that to every fucking person,
mm,
which is what these people do. They're trying to replace their identity with a movement, and it doesn't work because when
yeah,
that's all you bring to the table, and it's as shallow as that. There's nothing else, and people are like, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. Like, it's.
mm.
Can speak to that,
Yeah, but
AJ?
also it's
Absolutely.
just not being aware of how it's used
They aren't.
on the other side. Like what I find amazing is that sort of that bubble, that echo chamber, because of the tools such as turf blocker and those sorts of things where people, they've kind of blocked everyone.
Yeah,
They're completely unaware of how these things are being weaponized.
exactly.
Like like the school board crap in the United States, like
Oh
they've
my
just
God.
lost it,
Yep.
absolutely lost it. I mean, that's America, right? It's I want America to stay entertaining, but with no power. It's the same thing with like crazy people. I love crazy people. Um, I find them entertaining, but I don't want them to hurt anybody or hurt
No, of
themselves. It's like
course.
I'm happy with a funny old crazy person, and America's like that. They just shouldn't have power. I'm not going to give them political power,
Well,
right?
I
That's where it
think
becomes worrying.
I
I
think
love crazies. Crazies are great. They make life
the,
interesting.
the peak crazy, I think, was the most ridiculous thing aside from Chris Chan, literally like having sex
Goodness me.
with his own mother, but peak crazy, I think, with the Jessica Yaniv thing was when she was being arrested for, or when she was supposedly being arrested for having a taser illegally, and she was being
Yeah.
followed by journalists and trying to get interviewed, and she was literally swinging her arms, running at people,
Yeah,
saying,
I
"Stop
actually gift that.
harassing me."
It was like that thing in Toronto at the moment. The
Oh
teacher, the
my God.
woodworking teacher with the
Oh my
giant
God.
pawn tits.
Like,
And it's like pretty much to everyone's credit, everyone every commentator that I saw just went, this is a litmus test.
Yeah, exactly. Like
You know,
everybody has disliked that. Has just
yeah,
flashed
and it was
across
like
the
that
screen.
Mr. Garrison trying to get fired. Remember that on
Yeah,
South Park
Mr.
when he just kept
Garrison was
escalating
like
because everyone was
literally.
too afraid? And I just find that shit funny. Like, that's the problem, is that I think there's a whole cohort of like, the sort of extreme far right people over in the United States. And they're sort of, oh, I'm freaking out. And it's like, well, no, this is actually funny. Like, I love people who fuck with other people as part of like, how you were saying how you just walk around, you don't get hassled or whatever.
Yeah.
I was at an electronics store a few months ago, and there was this old sort of, middle-aged dude, but there was a gender bending, I'm not going to assume, they're in like full fishnets, goth hair, purple lipstick, 6'4", it was amazing. And this guy sat there just looking very, like, you could tell how uncomfortable. I love discomfort. That there's that thing, that awkwardness, right? And I could tell this guy was like just getting all like uptight, whatever. And I'm sitting there just laughing. I love people who annoy who just make people confront shit, right?
Yeah.
I love that. And I celebrate that, like, and that novelty, and the big balloon boobs. Like, the kids in that class would just think, I remember when the drama teacher married the science teacher, and that was a scandal.
Exactly. Like,
that was
like
the talk of the town.
Oh my god! Back in the day, it's just like, holy cow! But now we have this. Now we have like literally.
I think it was.
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think it was Hassan Piker, and I think his view is correct, which is, trans people can be crazy too.
Yeah, everyone can be
crazy. And he said trans people can be annoying and cringe, and it's an equal thing, right? It's like it's a numbers thing. It's going to be people that are cringy, but if you're using it for a political purpose, like, legislate, I think that's the thing, where equating laughing at something ridiculous is not necessarily laughing at the you get what I'm saying? Like, I think people have just sort of bundled.
You just laugh at the absurdity of it.
Like, yeah. Yeah, I do. My son's autistic, and my husband's on the spectrum as well, and they do stupid stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they spurg out. Like, that's one of my favorite words that I found from Kiwi Farms. It's perfect.
Yep.
You're spurging again. I love that, and it's funny and creative. And you go, okay. And that's the thing with the suppression of speech. It's like, well, because I have the ability to laugh at myself, and I think that's, again, it might just be different, right? Because there's that whole cohort of people who see. And I can understand it, because I grew up in a hazing kind of family where it can be considered abusive or harassment or bullying. But you got to get some sense of proportion around it as well.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not one of those people that's like, it's the world, get over it. It's like, no, try to change the world and be better. But you also have to learn to laugh at yourself, or you're not going to get very far.
No, it can't be serious all the time.
There's lots of. Yeah, but I've got a lot of, like, I'm sure that you've had a lot of pain, and comedy is about pain.
Absolutely.
And truth, and like universal stuff. And there's a lot of funny things about like transitioning.
Yeah.
That is really interesting as well. Like, I haven't gone through any of that stuff, but I've had a lot of surgeries, and it's like gory and crazy and weird things with your body, and and it's like, you should be allowed to talk about that without it being some sort of big political thing, and I'll always take the side of the person who's challenging the conservatives and making them fucking go crazy and talking about M&Ms in high heels.
Well, it's the funniest
I'll always
part.
side with the people who, did you see that thing? That was the that's what made me laugh this week, was Tucker Carlson. Like, it literally looked like a meme. The screenshot with the anime and the hentai thing, and it says like something about like trans something or other, and he was like, exploding milk porn. I was like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever seen. Like, and like Alex Jones, like, you got to be able to laugh at these things. Like, again, there's a flip side to this, which is obviously why he's in court and stuff. But watching him turn around and just call the judge a pedophile. Or like, literally, you sit there and you go, that's audacious.
Yeah.
I respect that audacity.
And we used to laugh at that. We used to be able to laugh.
I think most people still do. The thing is, most people do. Like, you hang out, if you've got any like semblance of an offline existence, most people haven't changed. It's
Exactly.
just that this is so heavily astroturfed, so heavily, bot driven, and people, reasonable voices. First of all, the second I have work to do, I'm not on Twitter. If you're on
Exactly.
Twitter all day, it means you got nothing on, and that's just inherent. And also, people, again, this is why I
Boy, do
study
I
psychology now. Is a
boy,
big
do I
part of.
have a group to show to you. Let me tell you.
Yeah, but I can have days where I'm just like on there all day and I'm
Yeah.
like clearly avoiding work. And then there's days where I just disappear for days. That's a
Yeah.
healthy thing,
It should be.
But
Absolutely. I
most
agree.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, but there is a general escapism that there's a certain psych profile with being active on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it needs to be taken in proportion.
It should be.
To the real world. It's not the real world. I think only 2% of people are actually even on Twitter, have a Twitter account, maximum. Okay.
Isn't it fascinating?
More
And
on Facebook. But
companies listen to that less than 2% more than they
yeah,
listen
but that's
to their own
because most
customers.
of them are journalists, and they
Yeah.
have again, it's because it's ground zero for like, the Washington Post.
Exactly.
And that's why I cannot believe that woman still has a job, but I'm sure she serves interests. So I just don't understand how that can be a thing.
I think that's a huge question. It's the bigger question in the meaning of life at this point. Like, how the hell does
As a woman in tech who was told merit my whole life about merit, you work hard and you're a good person, there's these people that stand as evidence that that's not the case, and
No.
Taylor Lorenz is one of them.
Well said on that.
She's a technology journalist.
Yeah. I don't know
cheering
how.
on a cybercrime. Like, I sit there and I go, is nobody going to say anything? Like the toilet paper thing. I sit there and go, are we going to talk about this anytime? Like, at any point, or are we just going to pretend that the toilet paper fucking thing didn't happen at the beginning? Like everyone just moves on and pretend. And you go, okay, is no one? I've got some questions. Like, are we?
It's
how you go. It seems obvious that the technology journalist at the most powerful media organization cheering on a cybercrime warrants some scrutiny.
You would think.
But and that's where I sit there and I go, this is bizarre. And that's why I make sure that I'm just loud, because I can do it with my real name. Very few people can do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I pay the price a lot, but I think I have a unique ability to do that because I've got that background in tech. I use my name, I back my words, and I make sure my arguments are correct, right? Mm-hmm. There's a completely left-wing socialist argument for this. And that was what I was going to say as well. Pro tip for anyone watching or who watches this, and I've been saying this a lot, if you're a real socialist, you don't weaponize employment against a worker. Exactly. Like, you just don't. You don't weaponize capital or power structures against an individual. I don't care how you rationalize it. You're not. That's an inherently right-wing position. To utilize power and institutions against an individual is an inherently right-wing idea, right? Despite what horseshoe theory people might tell you, I'm saying, just generally speaking. I just want that out there because it gets people like clear on what this is, which is that, we could go into CIA shit now, but this is a weapon. Like, this stuff is a weapon to quell dissent, right?
It is weaponized.
Mm.
And I'm disappointed
in the trans thing.
And I am appalled that because I'm of the I don't know how to long in the tooth. Like I've been around the block a few times too. Like, okay. I'm not Gen X. I'm on the cusp of Gen X. But I was growing up, right? I grew up in the middle of the big push for legalizing gay marriage and all this stuff. Like when there's huge protests and stuff like that. I grew up when even the breath of a rumor of somebody being gay would mean that a group of kids would go out and beat someone within an inch of their life in front of the school, like just for the rumor of being gay. And that was
us in high school.
Yeah,
that's how recent it is.
That's how recent it was. And like that was acceptable at that point. Like it was ridiculous. Like and like as a kid growing up and seeing that stuff, it's like You've like, honestly, you take a look at it, it's like, Jesus Christ, like, we're not even that far away from it. And having participated in the counter protests, like when gay marriage finally got passed as a legal right for gay and same sex couples, and having protesters blockading City Hall to refuse to allow people to go through and ratify their marriages and stuff like that, and being part of counter protests to kind of help and give support to the couples that were trying to go, and getting thrown, having stuff thrown at you, having been spit on, been hit by the signs as a 15-year-old. This was me, by the way, as a 15-year-old.
So disgusting.
That was not many years ago. It was nasty, and now we have people that are turning around and trying to weaponize it. And it's still happening. But like, and it's the funniest part is because people are like, well, the conservatives hate you, this and that, blah 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 blah. It's like, you guys, the people that out there that say, oh, well, why are you speaking up on behalf of the conservatives and blah 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 blah, or the right wing does this and the right wing does that. It's like, look, I actually have what I consider a friend of mine, probably one of the most right-wing fundamentalist Christian men on the face, white men on the face of the planet, in Doug TenNapel, the creator of Earthworm Jim. When I got to have a conversation with him on when he was allowed to be on YouTube, he's since been completely deleted from YouTube entirely. He's not even allowed to be on shows because he was pro-Trump, and you know how that goes. But he's not allowed to have an opinion. But when I was on his podcast for the first time, we've never talked to each other before that. He is like completely opposed to gay marriage, and he like was very much against trans and all this other stuff. Well, he wasn't against trans, but it appeared to people that he was against trans. Because he would make fun of people, and he would.
I think most people are actually trans indifferent, to be honest.
Really
and their
are.
only real exposure
They
to trans
really
people
are.
is aggressive activists.
Yeah.
Like in an everyday thing, unless like, you know, I just happen to be in progressive circles, like,
Yeah.
and I know like quite a few people who've transitioned, but that's unusual for most people.
It really
like,
is.
Most people's only interaction with you know, with a trans person. I mean, it's more commonplace now, but
yeah,
you know, it's anyway. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And like, and the first time that I ever been on his podcast, first time I've ever had interactions with him, go on his podcast, and we had a respectful discussion at the end of it, because everyone in his chat was expecting blood. Like everyone in his chat was expecting this to be a war game, you know, like blood sport and whatever. And it was a respectful discussion. It was great. You know, and like I have a standing invitation to come to his house and have cigars with him.
Yeah.
You know, so like you can have disagreements with people and still be friendly and still be friends with them and find commonplace and find it's one of those things that people don't quite understand.
Well, also, I think that this is where if someone is that I tweeted it yesterday. I said I don't have to like someone to agree with them, and I don't have to agree with them to like them.
Yeah.
They are separate things. And yes, I also understand that politics and values, you know, politics is linked to values and worldview. But at the same time, it's inherently, this is why I was like now retraining in psychology, because I think I want to solve some of these questions and problems, which is that people who are uninformed on politics tend to think, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I literally have postgrad in politics, and I think you're too obsessed with politics, and I'm literally obsessed and trained in it. And I think that people are like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not healthy. If you're worried about this stuff, and again, there's a luxury belief there. I mean, I think in the trans situation, this really is a fight that, you know, has unintended consequences that if I had known would go this far, I would have been more careful about the way that I entered a debate, right? That's something that, you know, how you go, oh shit, I wish I didn't know, right? That this was going to get this. Yeah. There is that association that you sit there and you go, okay, well, maybe I should have been a bit more cautious or sensitive, right? But at the same time, like, I don't know how people expect to change minds or win people over in any way. And this is not a civility argument. I'm not one of those gaslighting people. You don't persuade people with aggression.
No.
You just
Sure.
don't. Like, and, whether it's relational or physical, you just don't. It's not persuasive to people. And also, it's a pragmatic thing, which is, again, about what works. And the reason why you should be having conversations with the right, and like, there's people I won't necessarily talk to. I only want, as long as you're good faith
Yes, that is a big
and I
one.
like you, I will talk to you.
Good faith is
If I
important.
don't respect you, like, if I think you're just monetizing it, or, getting into sort of, I'm not I think there's a limit there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've engaged with sort of various, I've, they're not on my channel anymore, but I've had interviews with various people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the thing people that, especially the left, need to understand is that there is a void and a vacuum there. And this is where, when you were saying about, the sort of banning of sort of far right stuff on YouTube, I'm conflicted about some of this stuff as well, because I also am across the literature on the funnel and the pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a legit pathway. That seriously, the turf to fucking anti-COVID like pipeline is I was amazed. Even I was like, it's like it's like, I have a slight little objection to this minor policy issue to full blown like far right shit within 2 years. You're
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? That's a thing, right? All of the data does actually support some of that. So that's but a lot of that is because the solution of banning doesn't work, and it makes people double down, and it makes people feel persecuted, and it just feeds their persecution complex,
Mm-hmm.
which sends them further down. It's like, it doesn't work. So it's not even but it doesn't work. But also, people like Joe Rogan, yes, they're a gateway, but they're also a savior for the curious
Mm-hmm.
who kind of want to understand stuff about the world. If they've got, where else are they going to go?
Exactly.
Where are people going to go? And that's why I sit here fighting these fights, and I go, you know what? You got to be able to bring it. It's not the easy choice,
Mm-hmm.
because you sit there and you go, okay, well, why you should talk to right wingers is because you might change their mind, but also because you need to meet people where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be people who are not so great there if you're not there to show up and be stubbornly left and go, no, there's a left wing argument for this. No, I'm sorry, but you can have concerns about like the way certain legislation is worded and not be a transphobe. You can have certain, you know what I mean? Like, there is a reasonable way to have these conversations. And you can also have a reasonable conversation without descending into like doubling down and hating. Like, seriously, the number of, feminists, right? This happened with Prohibition too. Femmes always end up aligning with conservatives, even though it's like for different reasons, the result's the same. This happens every time, right?
Exactly.
It's not an unusual thing. But it's like people who started out with just reasonable concerns and just double down, and then now they're just full on like conservatives and actually anti-LGBT. And I go, okay, that's not good. Like, you were no. We have to acknowledge that exists as well. And that's the problem, is how do you solve that problem without banning people? And like, that's been my thing, is you need to reach out to people.
You need to reach out to
tech
people.
companies. There's no one, you can't contact anybody. You can't talk to anyone. There's no mental health support. It's like, oh yeah, you're on your own.
Oh,
and if you don't like it, we'll ban you, and damn the consequences.
Largely because the companies just hate customer service. Like, they are so allergic to customer service. Because I get it. Working, because I worked many years in a call center, having people call up and it be like the absolute, the entire apocalypse is happening right now because they forgot what their pin is, or like their pin's not exactly what they thought it was, and I had to spend 2 hours walking and like a 90-year-old man how to make a screenshot because the computer was asking him for his SIN number. Like, like it's that, like, I get it, like, customer service is a drain, but then when you take that away and you don't give people a way to like voice their concern, there's no outlet for that pressure, and it just blows out in a different area. That's usually how.
Well, that's why looking at it like the justice system more, probably, rather than customer service. So for me, this is what I'm actually working on, and this is my main project at the moment, and pitching, is an outreach, like much like community policing or outreach or whatever. If someone's at risk, or that they do welfare checks and those sorts of things, someone gets banned from social media for certain behaviors, there's an opportunity to reach out. Right? And go, okay, do you know what the rules are? Do you know why you were banned? Here's how this works. Oh, and I know that it's hard, and but unfortunately, that's the only real solution is to sort of do more outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Much like before people end up criminals, you sort of, in an ideal situation, you would intervene early, right? You'd actually just try to look at certain behaviors and go, okay, what support do you need? Okay, why do you feel this way? What's going on? That's the only real, I've spent years researching this now, and it's really the only solution that I can come up with that, and it's an expensive one. And unfortunately, I've tried to do this for years, is to get people to focus on the mental health,
Absolutely.
and they go, all right, well, it needs to be profitable. It can't cost us anything. Was it? It's going to cost you something.
Yeah. Or it's going to cost you a lot more down the road. Like, that's what it comes down to.
Exactly.
Either
and
they pay a little bit now, or they pay a lot later.
Yeah. Well, when Twitter gets sued and the EULAs are thrown out of court, which I think they will be,
absolutely,
that's going to happen. Like, people don't understand a lot of licensing agreements, terms of service, they haven't been tested in court properly. Well, that's why they're settling it.
They hope they don't.
You know that, right?
They hope. That's why
they settle cases, because they know that even the GPL, which is the open source thing, that's never actually gone to a superior court.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's been big debates about that, right? And these things are untested. And I had a choice about whether I was going to do digital law or psychology, and I went, I don't want to be a lawyer, too much paperwork. But the solution really is like early intervention. It's not just education. It's actually going, if you get banned, partner with BetterHelp. Do something, where you go, okay, well, have a half-hour conversation with a counselor about what happened, or give people a pathway to fix it. Exactly. Right. And that's the thing, is like the fact that I can be mass reported by troll farms, because I talk about troll farms a lot. I can be mass reported or targeted by them, have my account destroyed because of it, right? And put in the shadow algorithm or whatever, and have absolutely no ability to fix that. Even when they've actually turned off because I was a digital agency, turned off my advertising. I can't go into media producer to get rid of old videos or anything like that. Like, any of the business tools, they've shut me off. Wow. Right? I can only just use Twitter. Yeah, and because I've been mass reported, and I can't even. I've been trying for 2 years to get a contact at Twitter that I can go, I have been a target of mass reporting. This is, it's not my fault.
Yeah, trying to get a hold of anybody at Twitter at all that's not just automated.
Yeah, and like LinkedIn, you can, which is good. Because I've had that happen on LinkedIn as well. And LinkedIn are actually pretty decent, believe it or not. You'd think that they were worse, but they're actually better. And Facebook are okay, but the problem with tech companies is you've got to know someone at the tech company.
Exactly.
To get anything done. And that's not how things should work, right?
Well, and that's largely.
But anyway, I've been working on this outreach thing and trying to figure out a way to design a program.
Well, it's needed.
That's the only way forward. Yeah.
It's needed. The problem is, like, and I'll use Bell Canada as an example, because there's only two telecom giants in Canada right now, between Bell and Rogers. They own pretty much every single thing. And so Bell has a Let's Talk thing, right? They have a mental health awareness day where everyone, and they do all this like pumping the tires of mental health awareness. It's the last Let's Talk day they had. The day after, they laid off like 20,000 people.
Yeah.
What about
that? And then they go, cool, lifeline. If you're feeling thought, it's like, okay, that's someone. Let's just make this all someone else's problem. And I think that's tech's problem as well. They've made it someone else's problem. They're not paying taxes to be able to support the problem, and we're going to see this downwind. We're seeing it happen already. Like we joked, I think, was it off stream, where we've come out of COVID, and not everyone has made it.
Not everyone's okay
mentally, right? And it's been actually the people pre-COVID that seem to have it the most together. Because I'm used to chaos. I'm a person who's I'm just used to that stuff. So I kind of. I learned to roll with things, right? I've been traumatized so much over my life. You go, okay, it's just another thing. All right, then. People like that who've been through shit are just like, oh yeah, this is familiar. But it's those people that are like the sort of middle management, stable, 2 kids and a dog people, and they're just not okay.
Yeah.
It's quite, and I'm not laughing. I'm not being glib. Obviously, I don't want to be in trouble if I, with the board or anything. But I'm saying, like, again, you can simultaneously find crazy people funny and want to help people.
Well, ironically, talking about getting people in trouble with the board, there's a person in chat I actually wanted to introduce you to.
Oh, I haven't been looking at the chat.
Ken's counseling coach
Sorry.
is in the chat right now. No worries. Ken's counseling coach is in the chat, and he's a therapist in
I
the
can't
United
see.
States, and
Yeah.
he got himself kind of embroiled in a bit of a controversy recently as well. Now, he
Yeah.
primarily works with children and men who are veterans of war and stuff like that. So they come in
Oh,
after their
wow.
service, and
So
he
PTSD stuff?
he does a lot of stuff like that. He deals with child
Mm.
therapy and stuff like that. So he was doing a lot of really good work. And there was a situation that came up in the United States and Texas where it seemed like this entire town, like if you think Derry from the Stephen King story, It was a terrible place. Like
Yes.
this town is actually existing in Texas, and it is much much worse and much darker because it seemed like this
Okay.
entire town had been participating in this ridiculous I don't even know what you could call it, but basically there was a family that was going through a separation, and the mother was dating some big rich guy from that pays for everything in the city pretty much. Um, she was dating this guy, and he was a sexual predator, to say the
Mm.
least. He would
Goodness
sexually
me.
assault the daughter, to the point where her entire like she would start. I don't want to get too much into it because this is Ken's story
Yeah.
to tell mostly,
It's
but
pretty grim.
it's pretty nasty. So basically, to the point of her changing her entire behavior, demeanor, everything else like that. She would talk about things differently. She'd behave differently. So her father,
Yeah.
whenever he would have custody of her, and whenever he would pick her up, um, yeah, allegedly did those things. I'm not naming names, Ken. So, um,
No.
but here's the thing. It's so all of this stuff. So the mother refused to get anything done about it. The mother refused to look into it. Everything else like that. So the father took it upon himself to take her to the doctors, take her to nurses, take her to therapists, get this stuff looked into, and they determined that there was likely something going on. And so the dad tried to get this resolved, and through any means necessary, went to try and get this resolved. Even the courts, which the judge in the case had ties to the person who was allegedly sexually assaulting his daughter and assaulting their son and all this other stuff, right to the courts, up to there, and then basically the courts just shut him out and said, no, we're giving
Mm.
full custody to the mother, who clearly wasn't able to handle her children because she was definitely abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, all sorts of things,
Mm.
and clearly something was going on with her boyfriend, and being abusive in a really bad situation, to the point where he took his daughter and left, and all that stuff. So there's a big story about that. Ken was
Yeah.
covering the entire situation from the therapy side of things.
Oh, okay, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah,
I think it might be this. Yeah, okay, I think I remember that one.
it was the Sophie case, if you remember that one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So Ken was covering this on
Oh, that
YouTube.
was horrible.
It was terrible. Ken was covering this from a psychology point of view and a therapy
Yeah.
point of view, because he works a lot with children, and therapy for kids, and he was approaching it and reviewing
Mm.
it from that unbiased standpoint, and saying, is this, based on all the information, going through all the medical
Brave
records that
man.
were posted publicly and stuff like that. And there was
Yeah.
a group of people, ironically enough, that were from Canada, for some reason. I don't understand
Mm.
why. These activists were going after Ken, going after the father of Sophie, going out and just advocating for the mother of Sophie for some reason. Like they live in like Niagara Falls and Hamilton and stuff like this, and in Canada. They're like literally days travel away from
Well,
Texas. Like they're not even close. And they apparently took it on themselves to advocate for Sophie's mother and all this other stuff. And they had Ken fired from his position at the time. Went after his job, got Ken fired from his therapy job, and all because they painted him as a little people lover and stuff that I can't say on YouTube, and all this other stuff, because they didn't like the fact that he was taking the father's side, and that he was standing up for Sophie. He wasn't even taking the father's side. He was standing up for
yep.
Sophie in the entire situation. He was saying what was
Yeah.
best for Sophie in the situation. And these people went so
Yeah.
far as to contact his employer, chase him down, dox him, get him fired from his job and sever him from people he was literally in the middle of therapy sessions with, in the middle of trying to make life better for them and saving them.
Yeah.
And
Makes
it was just a terrible situation. And yeah, like Ken was saying, he legally obtained documents prior to any sealing order, and he's legally allowed to ignore cease and desist order because they held no weight and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff. They're just broken individuals. They're just broken individuals that do this.
And that's why coming back to process is like, because oh gosh, the child protection, juvenile justice, they're good analogies actually, because for this problem, because at the end of the day, you've got, the fact, because I actually started in child protection as a graduate before, all of this other stuff. So it's the longest time in my life. It was the most traumatizing, stressful thing I've ever done, working with kids like that and seeing the system for what it is and the process. But the process is there is child focused, and it focuses on the well-being and health of the child.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this, you'd see a lot of when I used to do the sort of crisis care stuff and taking down notes and all that sort of stuff, but you'd find that there was a lot of violent exes that would abuse that system, false welfare reports, making sure that to terrorize their ex-wives. Absolutely. And vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. The women that would use the system, and having been a sort of in a custody dispute myself, which is that there are holes in that process, and that's why that process needs to stay as robust as possible, because there are people that will manipulate that system, right? And it's the same like the family court, child protection, all of those things, they have to work together to protect in this instance children, but also users, anyone who's vulnerable. They need to have trust that the process is there to protect them, or the things are there, working in their best interests, right? And I think that's the thing, is that we just don't trust the process anymore, that it's fair. Like I'm so disillusioned with all institutions at the moment. Like my trust in everything is just, when you see the cover-ups that happen and how unfair and uneven these things are, and what happens when you just merely like that, just merely doing your job. Like I'm on Twitter most of the time talking about political. I go, that's just facts. This is just evidence.
Yeah.
Like with the evidence is not an opinion. It's evidence. Like it's, and I think that's, again, I could, as a user experience person, I could tell you that what it is probably on a subconscious level, because every tweet is equal. Our brains somehow process those little snippets of information as equal weight, right? Hierarchical, the way we sort information. So a tweet from an expert is the same as an idiot with mouthing off with an opinion, exactly. And they're given a false equivalency. Yes. Because they have equal. And again, I'm not saying that to be elitist. I'm saying in terms of they're given equal weight.
Now you amplify that, and you have 1,000 idiots.
In terms of the way that they're amplified.
You have 1,000 idiots saying the same thing.
Yeah, but just trying to do your job, and this is something that I've done, which is because I study the culture wars, and I study the stuff, and I go, well, just merely doing your job, and people get, it's like, no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I know how politics works. Like, what the fuck, And it's the same thing with this getting him banned. Like, was there an avenue? I might probably talk to him. Like the fact that there is no avenue to correct that. No, that's the problem.
There was no avenue to correct it. And from what Ken was saying in here,
like that's,
he says,
especially when there's a board involved.
His employer.
I can't see the comments. I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. I'll read what he's saying here. He says, ironically, the employer did violate professional ethics in terminating him, because ending the clients without time to transfer them. And he heard from a parent of a former client after he lost his job there that the kid and the family went downhill bad because the new therapist wasn't helpful at all, and they just didn't give any chance to have that transferred over. So Ken ended up getting a job at a different place, thankfully, after all this nonsense
happened. It does cause
happened.
Harm to patients at the end of the day.
It really does.
Because they feel abandoned, and I had that happen with a doctor of mine as well, where a stupid administrative thing, they forced him into retirement, basically.
Oh, geez.
And I was so upset because I didn't have a doctor. I didn't have any continuity of care. There was no plan. And they just decided, because some rubber stamp person decided that he'd broken some rule, right? And there was no real recourse. that sucks. And this is why I'm not going to probably won't practice, right? I
Mm-hmm.
just probably mostly research, but because it's just too much liability for
It really
yeah,
is.
it's just
And
insane.
you're
Um,
literally leaving it in the hands of idiots to make
yeah,
decisions that they're not qualified to make.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
thought it was a good
I
idea
know.
to do that to the families and to the people that Ken was helping out? And it's like they don't
Yeah.
care. That's
And
that's what it comes down to, is they don't care.
yeah,
Fortunately.
but it's also a misuse of again, I think it's like people just misinterpreting the actual intention. Like I said, getting back to first principles and why these things are in place and
Mm-hmm.
history, which is the reason why those rules exist, is to protect patients. So
Exactly.
if you're implementing them in a way that doesn't protect patients or clients, then you shouldn't be using that rule again. You get what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely.
it's not fit for purpose. It's not a weapon. It's something that is ultimately a good thing. Like here we've got reciprocal child protection measures.
Mm-hmm.
So the school works with the police. So again, school, police, multi-agency. So if a child is suspected of being abused in some capacity, they have to alert all of the agencies, and it becomes a cross-agency case,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you've got to work together. That sounds horrifying if you're on the wrong side of that.
Yes.
But the reason that it exists is because too many kids were falling down in the cracks, and
Exactly.
they thought that, and that's the thing is, this is also complex, and it sucks that people, I think again, people just assume common sense is the answer to things. Sometimes it's like it so totally depends on case by case stuff, right?
Yep.
Every case is just that's why courts have to have the final say with most things, and
Oh, and then
greater access to the legal system is
it's why you're
you know
seeing that that's the next target for a lot of these things right now, is the court
hmm
system. Like the Supreme Court in
oh
the
yeah,
United States right
you
now
have to be
is
the test
being
case, and it's
lampooned and attacked because
yeah.
it's being attacked as an institution, and because it's being painted that way by a bunch of different similar
hmm
interest groups. Because if they can
yeah.
get rid of the
Well, say what
Supreme
you will
Court,
about Yaniv, right? That
yeah,
was one thing where I actually respected the fact that
I was
doing the test
shocked they
case.
ruled that way. Honestly, I was shocked that they ruled against Yaniv.
Oh,
I
it kind of
applauded
also
it. I
shows a little
applauded
bit
it.
that it works a little
It
bit
does. At least
sometimes.
it
Like,
works. Like, thankfully, there's at
yeah,
least some sense out there still. But
yeah. But I think that it is, but a lot of these things, like I know the High Court here. I think you use High Court, Supreme Court, highest court. But our High Court, it takes 10 years
mm-hmm,
to work from sort of this over here to a final decisive High Court ruling, because you've got to go through all the levels of appeal,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And all of the stuff. And I mean, COVID obviously adds another like backlog of all of these things now, where
Mm-hmm.
things are going to, like in the UK, you're seeing like every time these things get taken to court, like this is why I think Josh should sue.
Oh, I think
I
so
really
too.
think that he should be trying to figure out a way to sue these people for a coordinated defamation. I think that he should sue Cloudflare. And and again, I'm not saying necessarily that I want to see Cloudflare suffer. I'm saying there needs to be the test case,
Mm-hmm.
so that the law is decided, so that is now. What I mean? I think a lot of it is just because people are flying blind.
It's largely this
You know.
is how law works largely in North
Mm.
America right now. Someone will do something to break an agreement or a law, and they are praying
Mm-hmm.
to whatever god that they don't get sued, because
Yeah,
they're going to prey on people being lazy,
and because it's so expensive.
and it's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
expensive, it's so restrictive,
yeah.
and that's
You can't
largely what
like.
it comes down to. Is
Mhm. If
defamation.
defamation suits were
Oh,
more accessible to people, I think you'd be surprised. Like, I am amazed that all these, like, especially how people can just defame people so brazenly in America. Like,
and
because
get
here
it to
we've
be
got quite strict
justified because of
defamation.
loopholes. Holy
Yeah,
cow!
yeah. But yeah, but it's just amazing that you can just openly claim something about someone that they directly caused suicides, like Josh, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that not be something, again, I'm pragmatic when it comes to speech. This is like not a censorship thing. This is a like go to the court
Yeah,
thing. Like YouTube have a good policy with fair use there, where they go, we're not touching it, go to court.
exactly.
Again, obviously there's obviously there's an imbalance of power there, but
Mm-hmm.
all things being equal, it's the best process if you can.
Well,
You just shouldn't have to crowdfund to do it.
well, you shouldn't have to. And like laws exist for a
Yeah.
reason, and they're written the way they are for a reason.
Yeah.
But because you have a handful of
Yeah.
people that don't like that the law doesn't bend to what they want it to, they make up stuff. They make up all sorts of
Yeah. Or they're
nonsense.
too lazy to persuade.
And they're too lazy to make a persuasive argument. Like
Yeah.
they don't. There's like, well, no, it should be this way because I feel it should. That's not the way law works, unfortunately. Like
No.
you can argue your point, but because you're not good at arguing doesn't mean that the law should change. Like that's
Yeah.
the way it's
But also, yeah, there was a
frustrating.
world before but that's the thing is I think that people tend to think that there's not a good reason for things to be the way that they are. And I'm not saying they should be the way they are. I'm saying that people, principle of humanity, right, which is that everyone comes to certain conclusions through, various ways, and you've got to assume that they've come to it for a certain reason, and that it's not just. I think to call someone a bigot or those sorts of things offhand, I think that's a cop out. Honestly, I think it's lazy, because I think that most people, when you actually listen to their point of view, I think it's actually just, I'm saying there are people that are actual just bigots, but again, you get there for lots of different reasons. And if you are a truly empathetic and caring and kind person who cares about people, you won't be strawmanning people in such a fashion. You'd be actually interested and engaged in them as a person and trying to figure out how you can, coexist. I just think that there's a whole bad faith aspect to people who do that kind of stuff, right? I think they're not the good guys. That's every definition.
Exactly.
Of you're not, and again, I'm not defending current systems, because I'm one of the biggest critics of current bureaucratic systems, all those sorts of things. But at the same time, like, these things exist for thousands of years, and there's all this like ancestral knowledge and experience and cumulative learning that every generation benefits from the wisdom of and mistakes of the generation before. And this is happening back to the internet, which is that we've made all these mistakes, and people who are on the internet sort of after 2013 or 2012 have no idea of the history.
Absolutely.
And the fights and even like you see this with feminists, where they're having this big shit fight at the moment between mums netters and everyone else, right? But they've always done that. Like the mummy forums have always hunted in packs. If it wasn't over this, it'd be over something else.
Exactly.
And and it's like, okay, well, maybe this is what there's a thing called historical materialism. Controversial view. No, but I'm saying you just got to go back and go, okay, what? And this is again back to what we're talking about the archive and why these are historical documents. It is very important that we
protected.
can, 100 years from now, even if you think it's wrong, it's not in your interests to censor people, because you could be wrong. I'd want to be proven wrong later on if I was wrong. I don't know why people.
I always
get
say,
what I'm saying. Like if
I always say that I want to be proven wrong, because if I'm wrong, that means the world is a better place. Because I am the eternal pessimist about things. I always am like forecasting that shit is going the most sideways it is, and if I'm wrong, that's great. That means things are better. But like we're looking at like a digital Dead Sea Scroll situation right now, where things are just going missing, and we're losing knowledge.
But it's also just a lack of faith. In people. Which is that you don't trust people. Like if you had all of my data and you looked at all of my stories and all of my fuck ups, and that's that thing where you take one tweet and destroy somebody. It's the same thing. Where it's like, no, you should take something on its. Everyone's complex, and if you pretend that you're perfect, I love it when people, fall on their own lies. That's one of my favorite things, because we're all messy. Everyone fucks up. Everyone's got stuff. Everyone's got stupid things, stupid ideas. We go through like lots of discrete, like Gen Z don't know a life where they're not under digital surveillance.
Right? It's crazy.
Like they literally knew when I conceived my son and I was pregnant with him. He has been monitored since birth.
Yeah.
And that is hot, but he's going to live his whole life. We at least had a life of teenage years. Well, I was on pretty early. So I was about 14. So that was very young, but I was still 14. I still hadn't had a childhood where I was a dickhead or, had bad ideas or, I still did, but you get what I'm saying? Like that was
Exactly.
now kids just don't get any escape. Like, and now they can not only just not have, like they can't escape it, but through sort of cross-referencing and cookies and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that they can detect whether you've done a ban evasion or, they can cross-reference all this stuff.
Oh, it's so wild.
You don't the fact that my son could be attached to me and punished and be behind, you get what I'm saying? Like, this
And
is
that's already
insane.
happening.
Like, what?
It's like, oh, you're
Yeah.
you're the son or daughter of X, Y, or Z person. You're just banned from life.
Yeah. It's insane.
So wild.
And I didn't even think of that stuff.
Yeah. How
The
could
box
you?
just asked me what I was feeling today. I didn't think it through beyond that. Like most of us just were like, oh yeah, this is fun.
Like you can literally play LOL on somebody's like tweet, and then that be linked back. It's like, oh, that person's a white supremacist, so you're losing your job. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
that's why that thing with Gizmodo where they're using the carrot emoji instead of the vaccination emoji. I was like, what is wrong with you?
what is wrong with you?
They're using it because this is the thing that annoys me, is they don't understand that if you just let them use the needle, they wouldn't use the carrot, and they wouldn't use the carrot. You get what I'm saying? They just keep. It's like people are going to go away from you. They're trying to get away from you. Leave them alone.
They all have to be Yaniv and just constantly run at people, swinging their arms, saying, "Stop harassing me."
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that people should be doxing or but that is, I think that's a symptom of, again, militarized police in America is the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
not the fact that cops can show up with, machine guns to someone who might have a machine gun. That seems to be the bigger problem here.
I mean, I'd much prefer police to show up with ninja stars and katanas, but
Yeah, exactly. But it's just like, okay, well, are we looking at the problem in the right way? Which is that if you can't really get swatted in Australia,
no,
because like the police will automatically assume that the risk is pretty low. The police don't engage weapon first, right? I watched a policeman when I was younger discharged his weapon onto a car that was running away, right? I just happened to be there and I witnessed it. There was a whole internal investigation about the bullet. Like,
exactly.
That's how last resort, like, police discharging a weapon is.
Yeah.
Like, anywhere else other than America.
Well, and largely,
and it's like, okay, well,
if they unsnap their gun from their belt, they have to write up a whole freaking report about why they did it.
Oh yeah, yeah. You guys have like horses.
Yeah. I like the big. There's a big kerfuffle.
That horse is using a carrot. You better be careful.
Yeah, watch out for that carrot. Now, like there was a big kerfuffle during the protests against the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Where some old woman, like her scooter got knocked over during one of the riots because everyone was running away because the horses, like the RCMP horses, were out and they were trying to get people to move, and she like tried to move and knocked her scooter over, and they were claiming that the horse trampled her and all this other stuff. It's like, oh, give me a little break.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but like it's ridiculous, like that, to say that. The number one, all these claims about people harassing. It's like, well, first of all, if you don't, like, the number one thing about harassment is it being delivered to you against your will and you've told people, and people ought to know that you don't want to see it, and it's being delivered to you. Harassment is not you going and seeking out the things that you don't like and immersing yourself in it. Like if you for whatever reason you don't like gay people, right? You just like, you can't stand they just really turn you off. They just really make you just want to like do something terrible to yourself. But you constantly go out to a gay bar and you just stand there and be like, man, I can't believe there's so many gay people here at this gay bar.
That's self-harm at that point, right? Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah. Like, why would you keep doing that? You keep like the people that are complain the most are the ones that keep going and immersing themselves into it. No one's forcing them to do it. No one's delivering it to them. No one's bringing it to their door. They're constantly going in and being like, wow, I can't believe all of these people are talking about me. Okay, let's get everybody. Hey, everybody that's talking about me, stop talking about me right now. Like, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I've never understood this urge to Google yourself or figure out like what people think. A famous quote: "What people think of me is none of my business." Right?
Exactly.
I just try to be a better Taya every day. That's all I can do, and try. Like I think it just comes from a place of narcissism, and again, there is an impulse there. And again, I'm unique in the fact that I've already gone through this stuff before it became mainstream. You know what I mean? Like I'm probably
Hmm.
more equipped, where I just went, like I'm probably a little further ahead. I've sort of got a decade on everyone else, like
Exactly.
before the sort of internet went mainstream. But I think that again, I think mental health angle, like, and outreach and talking to people and educating people, and also, I mean, one of the things I'm sort of humming and hawing because I've got to figure out a way to make money. I don't know how, but to figure this out. And courses I roll, but like reaching influencers and getting them really thinking about
Hmm.
community health, and not that responsible influence like in a superficial way, but actually in a, are you well enough to do this? Do you know what it actually involves? Are you aware of the impact of? Do you know how lookalike audiences work? Do you know how these things get radicalized? Do you know how you can be radicalized by your audience and vice versa?
Exactly.
Do you know these things? Like people just don't understand a lot of. They just think they want the fame, and then you get what I'm saying? Like
Oh yeah.
yeah,
And they run into
so
they
there's
run into
lots of
all
ways
of
you can
the
do this.
things they never thought about when it
Mm,
just like they see the
yeah.
ninjas of the world, right? Or they see the like the famous cosplayers, like Jessica Negri and all that stuff. They want to
I thought you were
emulate
going to say
that thing.
Jessica Unique.
Well, some people do look up
Famous
to Yana.
cosplayer.
Some people, unfortunately, do look up to Yana and be like,
Cosplayers,
"I'm
Eric
going to be
Cartman.
the next biggest psychopath." It's like, I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised if
yeah.
that's a TV series pretty shortly. But
Mm.
like
Oh, goodness
Canada's
me.
next biggest psycho. Like let's make it
Yeah.
happen. But no, like it's
No,
people
but
look up to these people and be like, I'm gonna do that. Like that's how I can be famous. That's how I can. It's like
mm,
back in our day, like we only had to worry about some psychopath like maybe going crazy and making a homemade bomb, right?
mm,
And like the Oklahoma City bombing in the United States, right? That was like the
yeah,
biggest piece of news. And it was like, oh my god, I can't believe anyone would do that. But now it's like a daily
yeah,
thing. It's like people go and do
yeah.
that all the time now because they see that and they're like, wow, that person, they did something, they became something. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna become famous, and they emulate this stuff
Mm,
all the time, and it gets exasperated because you have people that love to talk about them and love to idolize them and love to worship them, and there's no bigger place on the internet that happens other than like Facebook and Twitter. So like I don't understand why
mm.
places like Kiwi Farms
It's
get
all
blown up like
content,
that.
right?
It's all content. It's all content. Like YouTube is big on
Mm.
it.
And
Twitch is big on it. Like all these
mm-hmm,
places are like, as long as you're bringing in views largely, and if no
mm-hmm,
one's complaining about it, then hey, you go for it.
yeah.
Go for it.
And this was the blind spot because I also don't think that. I think when you come from tech, you're a little more forgiving of these companies,
Mhm.
in a sense that it wasn't a deliberate thing. It's that I think people don't understand how a startup tech company is over a barrel with VCs and the
Mhm.
money, right? But also the fact that you are completely replaceable. So
Exactly.
Facebook was, like I've, developed product and stuff over the years, and I used to take it personally and think that my product was shit or whatever because I wasn't getting funding. But I've realized, I think, this might be a cope, by the way. I'm open to the idea that it might be, but I also started to notice over time that a lot of the reason why people invest in the founders or the tech, it's not about the tech or the product, but it's actually about how malleable or um, not
100%.
malleable, but like
Yeah. How
the
controllable
founder
they
is,
can
right?
be. Yeah.
How controllable they are, how much they will be. Like the first thing when you sort of get money with a tech product is that they'll say, okay, well, here's like that Dragon's Den thing. You're going to do everything I say. And, if you want success, if not, I'll just move on to the next person. Because,
Exactly.
anybody could have built, there was 100 like social networks. They're easy to build. Anyone can clone them. But a lot of it is more, okay, well, what, how can we make it work? But the founders, the thing about a tech founder, the thing that makes you an entrepreneur or a tech entrepreneur or whatever is that you can't self-doubt.
Mhm.
You get what I'm saying? You need to be some level of crazy idealistic
Absolutely.
to pursue that kind of thing. But that creates a blind spot,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you don't see your limitations, that you don't, you know what I mean? There's all of these other things that come like from that, right? You don't see you don't see how it could be used bad, because the second that you start thinking about any potential negativity or negative consequences or anything, you talk yourself out. I talk myself out of everything because I see all of the potential scenarios,
Absolutely.
right? And I go, oh shit, you know, because I wanted to do a sort of, you know, I'm so glad I didn't, but I wanted to do a called Pool Room, where you could put all of your deep, dark secrets and your memoirs and shit, but you can release them on your death. So it's like a kind of, you know, so you get to sort of write to yourself and write to other people. You could schedule stuff for people after you posthumously, right? But then I thought, holy shit, could you imagine how valuable that data would be,
Mm-hmm.
and how that could be used to destroy people? If that, you know, like that, I just went, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But there's people who would,
Yeah,
right?
there's people who would.
Yeah, and that it's kind of one of those things where it's a self-selecting thing with the tech entrepreneur as well. So I tend to, because I empathize with Mark Zuckerberg. I do. I really, like, nobody wants his position.
No.
He's not paid enough for that shit. Like, seriously, I sit there and I go, there's no money in the world that would want me to have that job. You know?
No, exactly.
It takes, yeah. And it's just like, I think people don't realize what's actually, what the cost is. Like with Joe Rogan, I've said this before, where the cost for him, it's not his effort or hard work. For that $100 million, right, or that thing, the cost is that he's no longer a human being.
Exactly.
Like, that's his real price. It's not the hard work, it's that, right? And I think that people don't realize that the trade-off is that you give away large parts of your personhood when you make yourself a brand.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, and I think that that's something that influencers haven't quite figured out. But that's why I think, like, mental health outreach for users who are banned, reaching influencers, on better onboarding for people when they're on partner programs, right? So making sure that they've got access, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on, like, you know, around other things. But that's my big thing at the moment, is to try and design these programs. But it's just like, but they just won't listen. You know, at the end of the day, like, they just won't. Like, I think the tech bros are quite happy to just break shit and break everything, and like at the expense of profit. And
oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately, everything that socialists say about capitalism is proving true in that regard, which is that there are no brakes on it. You know.
No, it's all gas. No brakes.
Sorry.
It's all gas, no brakes.
And I just don't. Yeah. And I don't know how. I think. I mean, America white knuckles it. That's what they do, right? For the rest of our entertainment, they sit on the edge of a cliff. That's if there's anything that's the American dream, it's it's more like the American hope that they won't go off the cliff. Like, they're always there. They're always sort of on the brink of everything, right?
Yeah.
That's why they kind of, they're fascinating, complex, beautiful country, right? But at the same time, bloody hell, like, the brink of just is too much.
Well, and the unfortunate part is,
like, you can stop, guys.
The unfortunate part is that everyone tends to forget that, you know, we're all sitting there watching America, you know, teeter on the edge of complete oblivion, and all of our shoelaces are tied to America's belt, you know.
Yeah.
So we're all gonna go down.
Our dollar is literally everything. We're so dependent, and but but also they don't even think about, like, the impact on the world in terms of tech. Like, some of the conversations, they're like, we need Section 230 reform, or it needs to be a public utility. I'm like, I'm less likely to be active on a government-owned American social network. You can go fuck yourselves. No way.
Exactly.
It's bad enough now. Like, I'd rather corporate interest than the US government any day. You know, it's like, at least we've got. So, it's really complex, right? Because you've got that whole global aspect as well, which is, I'm a big fan of. I think that we should have sort of federated social networks, so you can have sort of more localized, and you can choose and opt in to whether you want sort of the broader world or not. Does that make sense? That cross-pollination, I think.
I think it's
especially
needed.
America, because they're so dominant on every social platform.
I think it's needed, because you have a lot of crossover, and giving people options is probably the best thing to do, instead of just dictating to everyone, this is what you have to do. Give people the option. It's like there's other places like Telegram and stuff like that are popping up here and there, but they're always getting smacked down, and they're always getting like beaten to the dirt by these other
because they
companies
want to
because
ultimately control.
they want full control of it. And so like it's we need to have options for people that don't want to just constantly get ramrodded by, you know, constant mainstream media sponsored news bullshit from whatever insert country here. Like like the whole thing with the Queen's funeral, right? Like that was just shoved down everybody's throats here in Canada. And like the big news story was it wasn't even talking about like what happened in Commonwealth countries. It was that only 11% of the American population watched the Queen's funeral, when like back in I don't know who the hell died. It was like Princess Diana had like 40% or something like that. It's like, because no one in fucking
I'm surprised it's that high.
Yeah,
goodness me,
it was a lot.
I didn't.
It's like, oh, it's dropped so much. Like it's like, of course, because America has nothing to do with the UK now, or the Queen or anything. It's like, why is that a news story?
Well,
why
Australia and Canada just sit there going, "You're both nuts." Exactly. Australians and Canadians get each other because we're just like, you're just both annoying.
Exactly.
Go away.
Like, God, it's just like watching like the top two. The top two people in the freaking just like whatever insert universe here, just duking it out as to who's the better one. Like everyone's like, just shut up. Like nobody cares. Everyone else got stuff to do.
And it's just but they're also just always going at it, and it's just like
they are.
And that's the thing that I think people. I spend a lot of time sort of conversing with the US, mostly because I'm trying to like. People don't understand. They're like, why do you care about America so much? And I go, because it impacts us in so many ways. A lot of all of this stuff has come, this PSYOP stuff that, you know, is being used is coming out of American politics.
It is. And
it's like, and people don't understand that, like all the COVID stuff, and it's all, a lot of it is cyber warfare. Like, and the reason we had people on our street fighting for their First Amendment rights. Idiots.
We have that here too. It's like, are you kidding
it's like
me?
It's like you know.
Oh my God, it's my First Amendment right. You are Canadian, sir.
Yeah. It's like
America is that way. You can go down south if you want to. Like, we don't have the right to bear arms here in Canada. We don't have free speech protections that are codified in all this. Like, you guys have been off on something else. We don't have.
I love that though.
Oh my gosh, like it's
so ridiculous. So they're like, the Constitution can't change. It's in the First Amendment. It's an inherently stupid thing to say. It was an amendment, you idiot. The Second Amendment says we can't change the Constitution, or whatever it is. It's like, it's just pretty funny.
No, it's just watching anybody at all with any sort of anime avatar or numbers behind their name on Twitter, trying to sound like they make a coherent point, and it's just like, wow, it's
it's good fun.
It's like listening to a Chihuahua explain rocket science to you as it pisses on your leg. It doesn't make any sense.
The thing is, I think we just take the good with the bad here, and it's again, I think as long as I think if this hadn't happened before with other new technologies,
true,
that it would be more scary. But I think that we're just going through a period of time. And America being like that, obviously they're more censorious as well, like all that history of Comstock and like Comstocking laws, and just that inherently more censorious, right? The idea, I don't know, like, is Canada, the idea of there being words you can't say is just insane concept in Australia for the most part, right? That's a new thing, right? That we just decided not to say them because they were impolite. But this idea that you're just banning things, it's just, that was never really in our DNA. Is that there or not really?
I don't think it ever was, but at some point it's just been assumed that it is, which is the strangest
just that dominant culture stuff. Yeah. Well, I think, again, it's just imperialism, American imperialism, right? Where we've grown up on American TV, and that has an effect on culture. Like, we get kids knocking on the door for Halloween. I'm like, what the like, we didn't celebrate that up until recently. It's not something that was common, but now everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just I think well, I think we'll figure it out. I don't know.
I don't know if we'll figure it out in time. This is the
it's
problem, right? Like we saw it happen with
yeah
4chan. 4chan got hollowed out and then got filled in by
yeah
government oversight, and I think
yeah
that's what they want to do. They want to replace all of these archive sites. Like, look, I use Star Wars as an explanation of how the world goes because it is so freakishly accurate as to how things have been going. Like,
yeah
what happened to Mos Eisley when the Empire took over? They didn't burn it down. They didn't destroy it. No, they kept it going with Empire oversight, right? Because why would you delete the fucking place where every horrific person on the entire galaxy goes to drink and share stories and do untoward
yeah
things? Of course, you're going to keep it going. So, like, at the end of this, I think whatever happens with Kiwi Farms, it's likely the goal is likely to hollow it out and fill it in with their own agents and take it over and let it go back to what it was, and have it
yeah.
serve their own interests.
And that's what worked. No, but that's also the best outcome for people because people are going to go into darker and darker and less accountable places.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to happen. If you send people underground, they're just going to well, there you go, prohibition. That was my last argument, which is
Exactly.
they're going to drink more poisonous alcohol. It's less regulated. It's the same decriminalization argument for drugs, right?
Exactly.
They're going to take, like they're going to go to worse places and worse sources for information.
And less trackable
And
places.
we already live in an information desert, right?
Yeah.
It's already paywalled. Good information is paywalled. So you want to make sure that the stuff that's accessible is at least somewhat reliable, or at least, because it's not going to be reliable, be there to correct it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's where the studies show that if you say that's wrong, people go, oh, is it? Okay.
And they just believe the first thing that comes across the timeline, though. That's where we're at now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But it's never fun to be the person who says that person is wrong because you're the one that cops it, like me. But it takes patience.
It does.
And stuff. It's the hard route, like to sit down and correct stuff. But banning disinformation that just adds to it just creates other problems like persecution stuff and feelings of that just causes radicalization. I can't help but think that the US government, they want people radicalized so they can just put them all in prison. Like it just feels that they just
can imprison.
They only know how to criminalize, and that's the only way.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's the authoritarian way, right? That's ultimately sliding towards the authoritarian.
That fascism's baked into a lot of the stuff, right? Yeah. It's deeply concerning, but we can fight it, and at the end of the day, it can be futile, but at least I think as long as you're in your head and you know that you did the right thing on a daily basis, there's not much else you can really do. You can try your best and
you can hope in the long run that
just hope they don't hit you, and
you hope in the long run that the right side prevails, and that and that at the end
and even
of the
if
day,
it doesn't, it does end.
It does end at some point.
And I know that it ends in a horrible way, and I'm not going to do that whole, Godwin's Law, Nazi Germany thing, but that ended too. And I know that I don't want it to get there, but it has to. This is the thing: when you understand history, it will reach a critical mass, but it ends in revolution or it ends in fascism. But even that ends at some point,
exactly.
And there's a reset. And I don't want that to happen. But it's the wheels of history are pretty compelling things. So it's like.
Yeah.
But
what times we live in.
Anyway, I'm trying not to be. I still believe that most people are good and want to do well, and we can get through it. It's just this stuff is just again holding institutions to account and making sure your targets are the right targets.
Yes.
Like not picking on someone like Careful's is like there's symptoms of a systemic problem, right? It's not necessarily. That's why I try to not focus on the individuals too much. As entertaining as they are.
as
the individuals are for the entertainment.
As infuriating
as they're the entertainment value, but you go after the structures, right? As best you can. That's my view, but sorry.
No
Wandered
problem.
off on a tangent there.
Well, I think it was a great conversation.
Yes, we've talked for ages.
It was a great conversation today. And I usually try to keep it around the 3 hour mark, and we're at 2:40 right now, which is perfect. Just so that people can have a nice bite-sized piece to listen to and not sit here and fall asleep. listening to us
Yes.
chartle on
I
forever.
know, especially because I go off on weird tangents. I don't
Oh,
even
it's
know if I
perfect.
finish a
I love
thought
it.
sometimes, but
I love it.
yeah.
And I'm sure
It's part of my
I'm
charm.
I'm sure you've had a lot of people compelled and are watching this now and in the future too. So,
Ah,
was there
maybe.
anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on today?
Not really. I just think that I think just people just be getting their head straight and trying to not buy into sort of, an us versus them. Like a big thing is that, in group, out group stuff. That's the stuff that messes with your head, I think, when you see, and this isn't kumbaya stuff like, oh, everyone get
Absolutely.
along, but actually just go, try to be more charitable, um, and be focused on truth. And like that's my frustration. It's just, I don't like lying. I
Absolutely.
don't like lies. I don't like, yeah, it's just when you start to see, because there's good faith people, there's good people, good people on both sides, dare I say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to
Good
quote
intentioned people
Trump.
on both sides.
But people can also be entertaining and funny and terrible.
Mm-hmm.
People are messy. They can be right and bad people. They can be
Absolutely.
wrong and good people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that I think that that's going to be the thing that keeps people on the straight and narrow when on the internet, on both social media, is that you can still love a person and disagree with what they say,
Absolutely.
and
I
vice
agree.
versa, right? And that's just a good way to navigate through things, I think.
Of course. And I think
That's
that's a
28
great
years of experience. Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
very great point.
And don't
And
make politics your whole life.
oh God, please don't, because
This is
I
what
agree with
happens.
that
You end up weird.
entirely. I agree with
Yeah,
that entirely.
and it's not sustainable. Yeah,
It's not. You have to make
no.
yourself your own identity, and you have
Yeah,
to figure out who
yeah.
you are. You can't just co-opt a movement or a gender identity or a political
Mm,
identity and make that you, because that's not you.
yeah,
It's a part
no.
of you. That's not the entirety of
That's a
you.
brand segment. That's a
Exactly.
brand segment, not an identity.
Exactly.
Like
And
don't let anyone be if you are easily targeted on Facebook with as a brand segment, you haven't done enough work. I confuse the algorithms because I can't be categorized, right? Because it's
exactly.
complicated. Yeah, make
Exactly.
yourself confusing.
Well,
Yeah,
I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate
no
your
worries.
time. I know there's some
Thank you
people
for having
saying
me.
in the chat that they don't want this to be such a long gap. Guys, I want to explain something just very briefly before we wrap up. The reason there is actually a reason as to why I haven't done podcasts in the past few weeks, because there has been a lot of people that have been scouring YouTube, trying to report anything at all in the past like 4 weeks or so, and been getting people deplatformed and deleted and removed because there's a big push. There was a very, very big high on the internet and in social media where people were listening to psychos, for lack of a better word,
Mm.
and they could say
I'm
anything
lucky
and
though.
do
I haven't
anything.
really had any,
This is the thing. It's
which is
like
weird.
I've got people that I'm on the radar for. Nick Rekieta had a
Okay,
lot of
so it's,
people that got him taken
yes.
off for a couple weeks, and so I've been seeing it, and so I'm like, you know what?
Mm.
There's not a
I'm
whole lot.
surprised.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to talk about because there's a lot of stuff that's changing every single day. I'm
Mm.
like, I'm just gonna sit back and I'm gonna take notes and I'm gonna read up on it. I'm gonna find someone cool to talk about it with, and then I'm gonna have a show when we come back when things have calmed down a little bit and things have settled down a little bit. So I'm
Mm.
planning on having more talks about this, and hopefully, Taya, you can be part of those in the future, in some future shows as well,
Yeah,
because I think this
more
was
than happy to talk about
a
it.
great conversation to have, and I think it's a conversation that needs to keep happening.
Mm.
Again, I appreciate your time coming on here and talking, and it was just nice to have a little bit of a vacation too,
Yes, yes,
with
have a
that,
chat.
which I think everybody kind of needs a little break from the internet
Yeah,
sometimes, now and then.
absolutely. Yes.
So, but thank you so much,
Touch
Taya.
grass, as they say, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Touch
Go
grass.
outside. The world isn't that bad. It really, it can be, but they're solvable for the most
Absolutely.
part, right? Yeah.
So
Anyway,
thank you
thank you.
again so much for coming
Mm.
on.
No worries.
And guys, we'll be back. We'll be back again. Just keep an eye on Twitter. I'll let you guys know what the next topic is. We'll talk about this. We'll continue talking about it. It's
Yep.
definitely not the last time we're gonna be talking about it. So, but until next time, guys, as always, keep your stick on the ice and bye bye.
Bye.
and we're off.